A young guy was lying on the ground completely without strength. In his hands was the weapon he had been fighting with until recently. Suddenly a big hand started reaching out to grab him. This hand belonged to a huge scary monster, who with all his strength in his hand squeezed the young guy. In his chest could be seen something strange that shone and glowed with red light. In front of the feet of the monster suddenly appeared a blond man who held a weapon and a shield. He was on alert and could not wait to see what would happen next. This blond man's name was Shin Yuan, and with each passing second, he could feel that fear was growing more and more inside him. At that moment, he couldn't think of anything else except that there shouldn't be any S-rank monsters in a dungeon of this difficulty level. That's when the blond man realized that luck wasn't on his side. The monster still had a firm grip on the young boy, but it wasn't just a monster, it was a legendary monster. Many called and recognized it by the word devil alone. It was invulnerable and not subject to any powers, and its specialty was its ability to control the mind. Suddenly the glowing spot in the monster's chest began to shine brighter. It was insanely similar to a bloodshot eye. There were many bloody corpses lying around the blond man. All these people had been mercilessly killed by the monster. At that moment, Shin Yuan felt all alone and desperate. He smilingly accepted the thoughts of his end, and realized that this time, he might actually die fighting the monster. Feeling his certainty that he would absolutely die, Shin Yuan felt tears rolling down his cheeks. But the tears only helped him to pull himself together and decide for himself that he must kill the monster no matter what. The blonde, determined and screaming bastard began to attack the devil, to which the monster reached out with his huge arm to fight back. Red bloodstains splattered all over the walls of the dungeon. 18 years ago, there was a great change in the world. The real world was connected to the otherworldly dimension gate. Only those who really had talent would pass the dungeon, kill the monsters and take the treasures, after obtaining the title of hero. Such talented heroes were few and far between. Only a few could pass the dungeon, but those who managed to do so were nicknamed hunters. But there were also those who had no talent. They were much more numerous than hunters, and they were simply left with nothing. One day the guy found himself holding a small vial with a green glowing substance inside. The blonde realized that the vial was just an unfinished hunter's medicine and it was only worth 20 bucks. Next was the ring. It was without any enhancing properties, the most real junk for 10 bucks. Shin Yuan was at the junkyard in the slum. He was carefully looking for something to sell. Sure enough, he was one of those who had absolutely no talent. And that day, the blond man was completely frustrated at not being able to find anything to sell. Walking down the street among people who were busy talking idly, Shin Yuan reasoned to himself whether what he found would be enough to buy himself at least some food. Shin Yuan was so engrossed in his thoughts that he didn't notice the figure of a man appeared in front of him. Suddenly, for the two of them, they collided. The man, who had not expected the blow at all, turned towards Shin Yuan and recognized him, shouting that he was a rotten man. Behind the two of them, a male figure much larger than they were appeared. The guy was tall, and with a smile, he hurried to make sure it wasn't Shin Yuan. The blonde realized that he couldn't avoid trouble this time. He felt a drop of sweat from his worries roll down his cheek. Gaining courage and pulling himself together, Shin Yuan turned to the guys, telling them that he didn't have time to have fun with them. He strongly insisted that they would talk next time. The guys clearly didn't like the blonde guy's words. The one below snatched the bag, shouting that they would now see what treasures Shin Yuan had found today, to which the blonde guy, who was being held back by the taller guy, shouted for them to give it all back. Shin Yuan threateningly mouthed for them not to anger him or he would make them pay for it. At this moment, the guys stopped. They were completely bewildered by the words they heard, but after realizing everything that the blonde had said, they pounced on him, shouting at him not to be so cocky and that he was just worthless trash. Suddenly, a man with glasses appeared in front of everyone. He seemed cocky and as calm as possible. In an orderly tone, he told them not to kill Shin Yuan. Walking further with his assistant who was holding an umbrella, the man continued to smile, casually adding that if Shin Yuan died, who would give him all the money back? The guys let the blonde man go, shouting only one word, boss. The blonde man fell to the ground. Turning to Shin Yuan, the man everyone called boss mumbled if the guy remembered how his father died. Shin Yuan recognized this voice. Feeling angry, he turned towards the boss at the same moment. Suddenly, the memories that caused him the most pain began to surface in front of the blonde man. He once again saw his father hanging in a noose in front of him. These memories pushed him once again to feel everything he was feeling at that moment. The blonde remembered how exhausted he fell to the floor and didn't understand at all what had happened and what would happen next. Through his memories, Shin Yuan heard his boss's voice again, who was caustically reminding him that his father had borrowed money from them at interest, hoping to turn his son into a hunter. The blonde man, feeling the blood on his face, continued to listen to the boss's words with all the anger that his father had bet everything on his son. Now this debt was Shin Yuan's. The boss clarified if the blonde man had heard that the debts of parents should be paid by their children, adding that his father died because of Shin Yuan's fault. After all, he was born a trash. Angry at these words even more, the blonde quickly rose to his feet and swung at the boss. The blow wasn't strong enough. The glasses quickly flew off the boss. The boss checked with Shin Yuan to see if he realized what he was doing. The blonde man froze at the same second, sensing that something wrong was about to happen. Enraged, the assistant boss gave the blonde man a strong kick to the chest, causing Shin Yuan to fall to the ground once again. Lying on the ground, the blonde man saw that everyone was crowded around him, continuing to smile and taunt. The boss asked what if he was killed with a single punch. Walking up to Shin Yuan, the boss put his foot on his chest. The statuesque man in a suit continued to taunt the blonde man who was in indescribable pain. The boss decided to ask if the guy knew that with his status, he couldn't do damage to him. Unlike Shin Yuan, the boss was a real hunter. His name was Ja Chong. He was level 20, had high scores in characteristics such as strength, agility, wisdom, physique, stamina, and was also a boxer by profession. Shin Yuan was inferior to him in all characteristics, and he was level 0. Sensing the position he was in, the only thing he had the strength to do was to tell the boss to shut up. Looking at the blonde man's insignificance, Ja Chong affirmatively said that Shin Yuan really looked like trash. The young guy shouted out that he would pay the boss back. Continuing to stand with his foot on the blonde man's chest, Ja Chong hesitantly asked if the guy would be able to pay him back before he died. Listening carefully to what Shin Yuan would answer, the boss put his foot on the blonde guy's head. Feeling the pain, the young guy said for the boss to give him 1 month. If he doesn't pay back the money, he will give his liver and his kidney. After a little silence, Shin Yuan added that if he pays on time, there is a condition. Ja Chong continued to listen attentively, to which the blonde man went on to say that he wanted the boss to kneel in front of the grave of the guy's father and admit his mistakes. After thinking for a bit, the boss smiled and confirmed those terms. Continuing to lie on the ground, Shin Yuan saw the boss wave his hand to voice his clarification. Ja Chong said that adding all the interest, the blonde guy needs to pay 70 million and he only has 1 month to do so. The man complimented that he was looking forward to hearing good news from the guy. Lying on the ground, the blonde felt a burning pain that ran through his entire body. He heard comments that were full of mockery, that people were recruiting scouts and for him to go try, that he was the king of trash and would be able to help out something worthwhile. At that moment Shin Yuan realized that in this world the strong survive, but the weak were destined to die. Thinking about what to do next, the blonde man walked down the street, realizing that if he wanted to become strong now, he needed to raise a lot of money. By chance, an ad came into his hands, announcing that there was a recruitment of people in the dungeon with a reward of 1 million. 1 trip can make a person rich, no requirements. Everyone is responsible for their actions. Seeing those who the blonde man thought knew the details, he walked closer to them. Addressing them, Shin Yuan stated that he wanted to enter the dungeon. Without waiting for a response, the blonde man continued, and asked how much money he could make. The man, smiling, replied that those who could survive would get 1 million, those who died would get 500,000, and those who ran away would get nothing. Hearing the man's answer to his question, the blonde man thought about the fact that to fully repay his debt, he would just have to go through the dungeon 70 times. Without thinking about his decision, he uttered the words that he would not run away, much less die. The man, hearing Shin Yuan's reaction, directed him to check in, adding that it was good that the blonde was enthusiastic. The young lad heaved a sigh of relief and realized that he was accepted. He only threw the man one brief word, "Okay." Walking to the back of the room, Shin Yuan heard someone behind his back questioning the man who was directing him if it was the trash from the slums, to which the man replied that such idiots were the best cannon fodder. Listening to these words, the blonde man felt a growing anger within him. He raised his right hand up, clenching it into a fist. The man added that what is paid in case of death is a lie. Everyone who gathered there just to be human shields, they had their own profit from it. Gathering in a crowd in front of the dungeon, preparing themselves for the horrors that awaited them there. Everyone shouted loudly and with hope in their voice, "Forward!" The man who was guiding Shin Yuan abruptly stood on the stone, with a large hammer in his hands. He was in a hurry to make an announcement that besides their team members, there were also a few newcomers with them that day. pointing his hand at Shin Yuan, beside whom 2 men were standing, frozen with horror on their faces. The man added that there would also be 3 temporary allies with them. The blonde man sadly thought to himself, and wondered if he wasn't even listed in the attacking force. The man with the hammer went on to say that he hoped everyone could get along. The rules are the same and the reward for any member who breaks the raid will be cancelled. Shouts came from the crowd that cannon fodder was of no value and that they could only be used as bait or human shields. Suddenly, the blonde man heard himself being called out. It was a nurse of incredible beauty. She asked the blonde man if he knew how to use the abyss system, not understanding what she was talking about. Shin Yuan interrogated what system she was talking about, bringing her hand closer to the blonde man's head. The nurse replied that the abyss system was created by technologist Shin Zhou, and this system gave some sort of ability. She was silent for a while, bringing the system closer to Shin Yuan's head. She added, to see the status of other people. With this system, Shin Yuan saw his status, which was low in all characteristics. The nurse, who was a healer by profession, was level 22 and had good scores in her characteristics, said that basically trash with no signs of leveling up was a weakling. Turning around, she got ready to leave, concurrently clapping Shin Yuan on the shoulder and wishing for him to continue working hard to survive. The man with the hammer once again said loudly that when the transition gate appeared, the temporary allies would go in front, followed by the tanks, and the support should stay behind. With a wave of the hammer, he shouted if everyone understood. The crowd shouted back in the affirmative. The 3 temporary allies, which included Shin Yuan, looked at each other. The man who was wearing glasses asked if the second man, whose name was Lao Zhu, was all right. After hesitating for a moment, he said that he was all right. After thinking for a moment, Lao Zhu added that he couldn't retreat now. He had 2 daughters to feed. Hearing this, the man with glasses said that his wife is sick so he needs money. If they don't get it, then it will turn out that they risked their lives for nothing. Shin Yuan looked at him sadly and Lao Zhu said yes. Shin Yuan heard a question to himself. Is this his first time? To which she affirmatively replied, yes. The man with glasses, after a bit of silence, added that the blonde man looked so calm that he thought he already had experience. He wished him good luck and suggested that he should try to survive. The crowd stood in front of the gate. A blue light illuminated everything around them. Everyone froze in anticipation. The gate began to open and the crowd rushed inside, with the words forward. Watching this, Shin Yuan reminded himself that he was here for his goal, the 1 million. The 3 allies walked ahead of everyone, lighting their way. Behind them they could hear the crowd chatting amongst themselves, saying that it was very strange that they had traveled quite a distance but hadn't come across a single monster. They were getting more and more bored. They wished the monsters would come out and be killed. The man with the hammer aggressively exclaimed for everyone to shut up and not utter the death mark. After all, the death mark was a frequent case of omens. Lao Zhu moved closer to Shin Yuan and asked if he felt cooler, to which the blonde man hesitated to answer. Shin Yuan continued to light the way, raising his hand higher and seeing something. He shouted for everyone to wait. The 3 allies froze. There was an eerie view in front of them. Behind them stood a man with a hammer and watched. Shin Yuan asked why there was such a big hole. The allies continued to stare at the hole, looking at everything they could see. After hesitating, Shin Yuan decided to clarify if it was a den of monsters. The man with glasses with fear in his voice questioned if it was definitely monsters, adding that there were a lot of them. There appeared to be small rock spiders sitting on all the edges and protrusions of this hole. The man with the hammer shouted loudly to the scouts that they were just small spiders, and to keep moving forward. Don't be cowards, for they still needed money. Lao Zhu smiled slightly and assured them that they were just small spiders and they would easily be able to kill them. The man with glasses was very scared and was already starting to think that they had fallen into a trap. But something very much caught Shin Yuan's attention. He concentrated and looked at one point. Lao Zhu suggested that he walk forward, checking the path. He wished good luck, addressing himself. Abruptly, blood rushed in huge scarlet streams onto the ground. Everyone saw Lao Zhu's legs start to lift off the ground. The blood continued to leave his body faster and faster with each passing second. The black giant spider clawed into Lao Zhu's head and neck, not letting him go. Shin Yuan was the closest to the first corpse. Shin Yuan felt puzzled and had no idea what would happen next. He could hear the fear enveloping his body stronger and stronger. The allies who were left too could not believe that this had happened. They were in denial of what was happening. They were standing in front of the monster that had mercilessly killed their partner. The man with glasses turned his head back and saw the silhouette of another huge spider. It was a demonic mutated spider. It was considered an elite monster, and it spat venom. The man with the hammer decided to act, calling everyone to calm down. He ordered them to fall into formation and prepare for battle. He thought to himself that this was an elite monster. Luckily they had cannon fodder as shields. If it didn't work out, they could be left behind. The man with the hammer was already ready to fight, but as he turned around, he and the healer noticed that this monster was not alone. From all sides, demonic mutated spiders started coming closer and closer to them, wanting to kill everyone there. The man with glasses crying and begged the leader to save him. Shin Yuan stood in confusion and didn't fully understand what he should do. The man with the hammer started destroying the monsters. He dealt the strongest blows one by one, sparing no effort in wishing death to this monster he was fighting. Hearing the crying of the man with glasses, the man with the hammer roared that he was busy and if the man wanted to die, go ahead. At this moment, Shin Yuan realized that the man with the hammer wanted to leave them. He froze, asking himself this question over and over again. He mustered up the courage to decide to attack the monster. He stood in front of the monster and prepared to fight. Striking, he lost his weapon. The blonde did not expect that the strength of the demonic mutated spiders was so huge. He fell off his feet. Quickly rising up, Shin Yuan once again stood in front of the monster, running through ideas in his head on what to do. The monster was getting angrier and was ready to devour its victim. Large fangs were aimed at the blonde man that stood in front of it. Shin Yuan stared at the monster in return, not realizing what was going to happen next. Seeing that the blonde man was in real danger, the healer reminded him to open the abyss system, fending off all the monster's attacks on her. She tried not to become the next victim. She turned to Shin Yuan and shouted even louder for him to summon a weapon and a defense item. Noticing something amiss, the man with the hammer turned around and uttered for the healer to spit on the fodder that had been prepared for the monsters. Stay out of the way where she shouldn't, and just do her job. The blonde once again tried to remind himself what the healer had told him. Her image appeared in front of him again, asking if he knew how to use the abyss system. Once again the words that the system could summon weapons and equipment flashed through his mind. Finding that the monster was getting closer and closer, the young lad realized that he had no choice left. Shin Yuan shouted with all the strength in his voice that he was calling out a defense that would shield him from the blow that the merciless monster was delivering. The defense was so strong that the attacking demonic mutated spider flew aside. Looking for new strength, the blonde man decided that he was ready to retaliate. He stood and focused his gaze on his opponent. Shin Yuan realized that there was no way he could retreat at that moment. These thoughts made him even angrier. Swinging, he struck the demonic mutated spider. The sparks from the strike enveloped the entire space around the blonde man. But something caught his attention. He realized that something strange was happening. He stared forward and couldn't take his eyes off what he saw. In front of Shin Yuan, that terrifying monster reappeared. It acted as if there was no strike towards him. The blonde man realized that the demonic mutated spider had not received any damage from this strike. The monster targeted the blonde man more precisely, and began to stretch its huge paws to grab the young lad. Shin Yuan felt the anxiety within him rise. The blonde man took an even closer look at the monster's mouth. Looking at this demonic mutated spider, he realized that he wouldn't be able to dodge the attack. Suddenly, a bright light dispelled all of Shin Yuan's fear and terror. The next moment, he saw a man with a hammer killing the monster, uttering words that it was the last spider. Looking at the blonde man, the man was surprised. He didn't expect this at all from the newcomer. He didn't think that he had the courage to fight elite monsters. The crowd that was around Shin Yuan was reporting to the leader that all the spiders were killed. The man with the hammer didn't really listen to them. He turned his back to them, and looking at the blonde man recognized that the trash had balls. Shin Yuan felt completely relieved. He relaxed at the thought that he had managed to survive in such a situation. One of the crowd approached the scout, saying that he could get up. If not, they would leave him there. The man who was wearing glasses didn't understand what had happened. Tears were pouring down his cheeks. He repeatedly repeated and begged to be saved. The guys were looking at the scout. They thought they were going to make a great profit. All that was third-rank fragments and one weapon. Getting closer to the crying man, the bald guy swung his dagger and called the scout a lowlife. The bald guy shouted out that the thief's dagger was what was needed, for it was a brutal bone dagger. The weapon was rare and gave the advantages of a quick attack. After noticing this dagger, Shin Yuan realized that it was a professional weapon. He would want one for himself as well. The man who had the hammer noticed that Shin Yuan was jealous. He said that their team was lucky. They had many good items from the monsters. continuing to look at the blonde man. The man added that if Shin Yuan didn't die, he would also get such a weapon. He had high hopes for the young lad. Hearing this, Shin Yuan was shocked. The crowd rushed forward. The man with the hammer, whom everyone called the leader, shouted that the place had been cleared and they could move forward. One of the crowd shouted for the cannon fodder to move their limbs faster. Walking forward, Shin Yuan noticed his partner. He was sitting on the floor and couldn't believe that their third partner Lao was dead. He didn't know what to do next. He grabbed his head and swayed back and forth. Looking at the map, one could find that the end of the dungeon had to be up ahead. The leader took the map in his hands and determined that the dungeon they were in didn't have a boss-level monster, but there was a treasure trove. Turning around a bit and looking at his team, he said that if they were lucky, they would be able to find the artifacts. The crowd, hearing the good news, became excited to search for the artifacts. Presenting the artifacts in front of him, Shin Yuan came to the point that from the group's analysis, the chances of getting an artifact were only 0.5 out of 10,000. Each artifact has tremendous power. It is the symbol of a true top-notch team. The leader once again addressed the blonde man, warning him against traps, for Shin Yuan was already enthusiastic. The man with the hammer once again reminded him of his high hopes that he placed on the young lad. Hearing everything the leader was saying, the blonde reminded himself that they were using the scouts as bait and cannon fodder. Walking on, the guy in the crowd once again called out to the leader to see. In front of them were huge piles of gold that shone and sprinkled from all directions. Walking on, the guy exclaimed enthusiastically that there was gold everywhere. Piles of gold. Seeing it all in front of him, the leader froze and realized that they would be rich. As they walked farther and farther away, the crowd rejoiced at the opportunity they had to become rich. Not believing their eyes, they began to feel all the gold that lay before them. It seemed like it was all an illusion. The healer was glad for the opportunity to take a well-deserved rest. The two scouts behind her didn't understand what was going on. Shin Yuan wondered if this could be the boss's room. What the blonde didn't expect was that no one cared about the possible traps that could catch them off guard. Shin Yuan tried to stop the crowd, but behind him, he heard the enthusiastic shouting of his partner who was ready to get a lot of money. Looking around, Shin Yuan noticed a huge statue in front of him. He began to scrutinize it carefully. Suddenly, the statue's stone arm changed its position. The blonde man noticed the hand moved. He once again tried to stop the crowd. Suddenly, the sound grew louder and louder with each passing second. Shin Yuan watched closely and realized that trouble awaited them. The stone statue's arm began to reach down faster and faster, the blonde man warning the team that they should leave as soon as possible. The guy who had the stone arm hovering over him decided to make a joke, asking the blonde guy if he was worried about not getting anything. Suddenly, the stone hand rumbled down on the gold that was lying on the ground. The leader looked up sharply, not realizing what the hand was. Repeating the movements behind the leader, the team couldn't believe that the statue was alive. A huge monster appeared in front of them, with a red spot in its chest that emitted light all around. The leader found himself facing the monster, standing face to face with it. At this moment, he shouted to the team that it was the dungeon boss. Everyone had to get in formation and prepare to attack, holding his weapon in his hands, standing in front of the monster and preparing to attack it. The guy from the team shouted that he would aggro the monster. The guy pointed his weapon at the monster and launched a raging fire discharge at it. After the monster took this blow, the crowd heard the sound of a crushing earthquake. The leader, holding his hammer firmly and confidently in his hands, struck directly at the monster's leg. A young guy, a member of the team, standing in front of the monster, decided to attack it in the same way. Getting down on one knee, he prepared his weapon and waited for the right moment. Watching what was happening, the guy pounced on the monster to chop off its head. The next moment, he felt that things didn't go according to plan. The guy looked at the monster incomprehensibly. The monster opened its mouth. A purple ball appeared in its mouth and glowed around it. At that moment, a bright beam of light went from the monster, which killed the guy in front of him. The leader couldn't believe his eyes that the death of the guy from his team came so quickly. The healer, turning to the leader, whispered that they wouldn't be able to. The leader didn't understand what she was saying. The healer, named Su Yun, turned to everyone to start running. She was sure that the team wouldn't be able to win. Everything was crashing around the monster. It was a devil with inexhaustible power. It had maximum immunity and also had the ability to control the mind. The guy who was striking with the raging discharge couldn't believe that there was a monster in front of them. Blood splattered on everything around them. The monster grabbed this guy, squeezed tightly in his hand, so tightly that it killed the team member. Watching this, the scouts realized that they needed to escape. The scout was begging louder and louder to be saved. He didn't want to die. Shin Yuan stood in front of the monster, holding his weapon and shield, preparing for battle. Watching the sparks that flew from the monster, the leader was greatly frightened. Looking at everything that was happening, Shin Yuan watched as the crowd backed up, lying on the ground. The blonde man, sensing the fear, turned around to the side, looking at everyone. The leader, not expecting such a battle at all, begged Shin Yuan to quickly take him out of that place. He didn't want to die. He was willing to pay money as much as Shin Yuan would name him. He wanted to be saved. Facing the monster, standing on alert, Shin Yuan realized that he was completely helpless and was left alone with death while the entire team was behind him. The monster, whose chest stain began to glow even brighter, grabbed the healer, holding her tightly in his arms. He didn't notice Shin Yuan was in front of his feet. The blonde man realized that regardless of his actions, he would still die in this battle. Some sharp sound caught Shin Yuan's attention. The monster was stretching its huge hand towards the blonde, beckoning the guy towards him. Shin Yuan started to run, trying to strike the monster. Once very close to the devil, Shin Yuan reminded himself again that regardless of his actions, he would still die. He furtively glanced at the monster, putting out his hand. The monster threw a punch at the young lad. Shin Yuan, upon receiving the blow, began to fall down. The blow was so strong that Shin Yuan kept flying farther and farther away from the monster. He was confused in his thoughts, unable to understand exactly what was going on, but he felt that he was flying, getting farther and farther away from the monster. Opening his eyes, Shin Yuan was shocked. He saw a statue that had a sharp top. At the bottom of this statue sat a stone girl. Sharp red flashes illuminated the entire dungeon. A fierce scream pierced every corner of the room. Scarlet drops of blood splashed in all directions. The sharp top of the statue pierced Shin Yuan's body through and through. Blood continued to mercilessly leave Shin Yuan's body drop by drop. Streams of scarlet blood ended up on the stone statue of the girl. Shin Yuan, feeling a wild pain, realized that his body had been pierced through. He felt that death was near and started to fall down without resisting it. But suddenly hands appeared ready to catch him. The blonde man was called out by someone. As he opened his eyes, he didn't realize what was going on or who was bothering him. He heard something stroking his hair, telling him that he needed to wake up quickly. The stone statue turned into a living girl. The head remained in the shadows that Shin Yuan couldn't see the girl's face. She had been sleeping for a very long time and didn't expect anyone to wake her up at all. Shin Yuan looked carefully, and questioned if it was the girl in truth. Stepping out of the shadows, revealing her face, the girl stared at the guy, calling him a boy. Smiling and looking intently at Shin Yuan, the girl decided to ask if he wanted strength. Flying above the blonde, the girl approached the guy. She felt sorry for the poor, weak boy who was looked down upon by everyone. Shin Yuan carefully looked at the girl who hovered in the air right in front of him. She continued her words, saying that it was fate that chose the blonde. Shin Yuan tried to comprehend everything he heard. Suddenly a picture of him being pierced through appeared before his eyes. He remembered how he was pierced a few moments ago. He began to feel his body, trying to find anything that would indicate the events that had happened. But finding nothing, he asked the girl where the wound had gone. Still in the air, the girl replied that she had patched the blonde man up as a greeting. He turned around and looked questioningly at the girl, asking who she was. Looking at the guy, the girl called herself his god, adding just 2 words, Atolo Boros. She continued her story that she had been trapped there for centuries. Listening to the girl's words, Shin Yuan noticed golden cards appearing out of nowhere, hovering in the air above him. The golden cards lined up in a row in front of him, and he heard the girl say that he had freed her. Looking at the blonde man, raising her index finger upwards, the girl informed him that the guy would be rewarded for it. After hesitating for a bit, she added that Shin Yuan would receive the blessing of the god of fate. The golden cards in front of the blonde guy started to stack into a deck, still hanging in the air the same way. The deck of cards froze in front of the guy, glowing a bright yellow color. Shin Yuan heard that each card had a different power and he needed to draw a card. Shin Yuan pondered over what he had heard. He pondered over whether each card had its own power, how many cards he could draw. 1, 2. He stopped pondering to stop the childishness that was going on. The girl turned around to the blonde man, and with a smile said that she was his master from that moment on. But something in Shin Yuan's actions caught her attention. She angrily shouted out what the blonde was doing, to which Shin Yuan replied that he was taking all the cards, confidently reaching for the entire deck of cards. The monster still continued to stand amidst all the scattered gold. The room was lit up with bright beams and sparks of yellow color. They were everywhere. The red spot of the devil began to give off a red light brighter and brighter. He was carefully looking at everything that was happening. Shin Yuan, who was enveloped by the bright yellow color, stood there wondering if he was still alive. A map appeared in front of him. He didn't realize if it was the map he had taken earlier. Looking closer at the card, he saw the image of the girl he had interacted with a few moments ago. He thought he had turned the goddess into a card. The girl, noticing the card with her image, didn't understand why she had become a subordinate. Shin Yuan continued to keep looking at the card that was in front of him. Behind him, the blonde man heard the goddess scolding him for taking all the cards at once. He reconsidered if he could definitely hear Boros taking a card in his hand. Shin Yuan realized that he was only holding one card even though he took all of them. He once again heard the voice of the goddess angrily reminding him that the cards were her power. Taking all the cards, they merged together. Suddenly, the monster opened its mouth and shouted loudly. Shin Yuan, holding the card in his hand, heard that he had to quickly pull the card and reveal his artifact, the fortune wealth. The card once again hung in the air for a bit and began to shine brightly again. Shin Yuan noticed the cards in front of him started to line up in a row again. He realized that this was how the card he had in his hand had split. Standing in front of the monster, looking at all the cards, he heard a voice from behind him hurrying him along. The girl shouted even louder for Shin Yuan to pull the card. She moved closer to the blonde man, and reaching for his hand that held the card, she ordered her clone to rise up. Suddenly a new image appeared on the map. It was the goddess of war, a god that could not be defeated. This mythical creature appeared right in front of Shin Yuan. He was surprised that the map had become human. Looking at the girl, he tried to clarify if it was the goddess of war. The girl froze in front of everyone, preparing for her opponent's next move. She flew upwards, holding a long red sword in her hands. The girl found herself facing the monster. A bright light illuminated all around. Shin Yuan raised his head up and watched what was happening. The girl hung in the air and brought her wings together in front of her. Shin Yuan watched with interest to see what would happen next. The red spot in the monster's chest glowed with a red light. The goddess of war flew even higher above the monster as it was enveloped in incredible pain. It seemed like this monster had huge tentacles that were shrieking from what they were feeling. A blue light illuminated everything around it. The goddess of war continued to strike her opponent, getting even angrier. She prepared to strike again. Holding her sword in her hands, the goddess flew upwards, aiming at the red spot in the monster's chest. Her actions made everything around her glow with yellow light. Stabbing the monster through, an incredible stream of light pierced through the monster. The goddess of war watched from above to see what this battle had come to. The devil fell to the ground. There was a loud sound. All of the monster's tentacles continued to reach upwards. Smiling, the goddess of war gradually started to return to the map where her image was. Shin Yuan saw a new map in front of him where the goddess of war was depicted. He realized that it had become a map once again. Thinking over everything that had happened, he saw the abyss system where it was announced that the enemy had been defeated and he was the lucky one. Standing in the middle of the dungeon, he saw a bright blue light spill out. He walked further towards what looked like a gate. The light became brighter and brighter. Shin Yuan froze and carefully looked forward, studying what he saw in front of him. The girl, once again hovering in the air behind him, wondered what he was thinking about. Continuing to look in front of him and beyond, Shin Yuan asked why on earth the girl didn't use the divine door. Laughing, she asked the young blonde man for permission to possess the door. Smiling, the goddess called Shin Yuan a smart ass. As he got closer, the boy noticed that the girl had become quite tiny. She flew up to him and hit him in the face, making Shin Yuan's forehead turn red. The girl reminded the boy again that he had taken all the cards and that made her so small. She exclaimed indignantly that he didn't just take the cards, he destroyed her deity statue as well. Shin Yuan really did bring only misfortune. Flying up to her face, the goddess shouted that the guy was not even capable of controlling the full power of the cards that he had chosen, killing the terrifying monster. He had only used half of the full power that was possible. Shin Yuan tried to apologize for his act. Shin Yuan remembered that there was something he had completely forgotten about. He realized that it wasn't that important and decided to thank the goddess by calling her a Metlo Ordomris. Hearing this made the goddess even angrier. She angrily reminded him that her name was Boros. Shin Yuan said in an apologetic tone that it was hard to remember. He asked for permission to just call the goddess Atello. Shin Yuan remembered everyone he started this journey in the dungeon with. The silhouettes of the leader, the healer and the surviving scout appeared before his eyes. Thanks to Atello he didn't end up like them. Hearing everything the blonde said, Atello offered to forget their disagreement from earlier. She reminded him that thanks to Shin Yuan she had risen and now she had to accompany him for a while. The blonde was fine with that but felt the urge to take a nap. But he still had a lot of questions. Atello began to distance herself from him. Shin Yuan remembered that the leader was dead. He wondered how he would be able to get his paycheck. Suddenly a silhouette of a man appeared in front of the blonde man. Shin Yuan noticed that the system had marked the location of the treasure. Looking at the man, the young lad felt frightened. It was a hunter. Besides the man, Shin Yuan was surrounded by people on all sides, pointing their weapons and lights directly at him. The man who was standing in front of the young lad asked him to come along with them. This man was a fourth master, S rank. He had fiery characteristics and was a boxer by profession. His name was Xiao Wang. As he continued to look at Shin Yuan, he realized that the hunter had been discovered. The blonde man heard what was said by the man and looked questioningly at everyone around him. Shin Yuan did not have time to say anything. Suddenly there was darkness in front of him. High above was a camera that was recording the events taking place. Shin Yuan found himself in the room where he was being interrogated. He was sitting at a table, handcuffed. Behind him high in the wall was a long window. In front of him was a cup and a chair. Xiao Wan was standing on the right side of the blonde man and trying to find out important information that the young guy couldn't find an answer to. No matter how many times Shin Yuan was asked, he wouldn't answer differently. Shin Yuan clenched the hands that were handcuffed in front of him into fists. He was trying to prove that he was a civilian city dweller and was there by chance. Xiao Wan was not satisfied with the answer he heard from the blonde man. It was starting to make him angry. The boxer abruptly knocked over a chair, creating a very loud noise. Moving closer to Shin Yuan, Xiao Wan grabbed the man by his shirt collar and assured him that they had seen the guy come out of the dungeon depths, not being there by accident. Shin Yuan, feeling the boxer's hands near his neck, tried to assure that he was just passing by. Suddenly, their conversation was interrupted by an insistent knock on the door. The door opened. A girl appeared on the doorstep and tried to interrupt what was happening. It was a fourth master named Xiao, S rank. She was an electro-mage. She reported that the report was ready. Shin Yuan was very weak, despite what she had seen. The blonde man was not able to mop up the dungeon. Xiao Wang continued to stare intently at Shin Yuan's face. Shin Yuan felt himself being abruptly released. He started to fall to the floor out of surprise. A key was brought to the blonde man's hands. Removing his handcuffs, Xiao apologized for wasting time and informed that Shin Yuan was free. The blonde didn't mind. Xiao Wang stood watching the blonde leave the room. Xiao advised Shin Yuan to go through the identification area a little later and get his license, and after that he can go. Also, she thanked him for his cooperation. Shin Yuan and Xiao said goodbye, waving to each other. The blonde man walked out into the corridor and headed for the exit. Xiao Wang indignantly asked if they would really let the young guy leave. Would it be right since he was the only survivor? To which Xiao replied that it didn't explain how this blonde man had cleared the dungeon. From that moment, looking at the abyss system, Shin Yuan could be called a weakling. The sunlight illuminated everything around him. The sky was so bright, the rays of the sun breaking through the clouds. Shin Yuan stopped at the exit. Standing on the steps, he tried to cover his eyes from the bright rays of the sun. He was glad that he could finally see the sunlight. Atello reappeared in front of Shin Yuan. She informed him that she was going to look for him if he didn't come out soon. The blonde man was glad from the unexpected encounter. He looked at her surprised and decided to wonder why on earth she was in the same place as him. Atello could feel the anger and aggression building up in her more and more every second she heard the guy's words. She flew up to the blonde guy, punching him in the ear. Atello nervously yelled and asked why on earth he wanted to get rid of her. Shin Yuan tried to apologize. Standing in front of the huge multi-story building, Shin Yuan realized that the ones inside were the strong ones. Pondering further, Shin Yuan added that this was the office of the hunters. They were responsible for hunting and traversing the dungeons. They were the elite among the elites. Atello blurted out that it didn't matter anymore. She asked the guy what he planned to do next. Shin Yuan confidently said that he should repay his debt and then punish him. The blonde guy came to return what he owed. In the room, the boss was sitting at the desk. All his assistants were standing in front of him waiting for instructions. Shin Yuan stood in front of the desk. The boss decided to remark that he didn't even expect the blonde guy to come. Shin Yuan lifted up a blue stone. It was an incredibly rare blue monster heart. He didn't know how to explain how he was able to obtain it. The boss congratulated Shin Yuan for covering the blonde man's debt. Taking the blue monster heart and placing it in front of him, Shin Yuan reminded the boss that there was something the boss had to do. The boss, smiling and looking at the guy, asked what else they could help him with. Shin Yuan stretched his hand forward, pointing his thumb in front of him. The blonde guy shouted for the boss to kneel down. The young guy repeated his words even louder, addressing the man who was sitting across from him. The boss didn't expect this. He wasn't going to comply at all with what the blonde guy was telling him, calling the guy a bastard. The boss shouted loudly, addressing the blonde man if he was looking for death. Abruptly and aggressively stood up, resting his hands on the table. The boss looked at Shin Yuan. The blonde man advised the boss not to get so angry. Shin Yuan took out a card, carefully continuing to hold it in his hand. The card began to illuminate everything around with a yellow light. The boss folded his hand into a fist, about to punch the young lad. The yellow light illuminated everything around him. The blonde confidently informed him that it was his time to collect his debts. Taking the card in his hands, Shin Yuan looked at it carefully. He pronounced that the first card was a thunder shield. This meant that those who dared to attack the blonde man would be struck down by lightning. The boss looked at Shin Yuan carefully, not understanding what cards were being talked about. All the defenders and assistants that were behind Shin Yuan ran to defend their boss, wanting to kill the young lad. Shin Yuan made a decision to take out the second card. The boss, hearing the blonde man's intentions, ordered his men to kill the young guy. Shin Yuan took out the second card, shouting a sandblast strike. An image of a sand fist appeared on the golden card. This card was capable of causing that fist to strike and punish the enemy. A yellow light illuminated the room. The boss looked carefully and questioningly looked at what was happening, not believing his eyes that it was sand. The moment Shin Yuan struck, the entire room shook. All the people present in the room flew up. No one realized what kind of power it was. The boss's glasses flew off of him. The man also flew off to the side, wondering what was going on. The yellow light that illuminated the room changed to a lighter light that resembled a shade of white and gray. Shin Yuan got up from the floor and turned to the boss, reminding him of everything he had said earlier about the boss kneeling down and apologizing. The blonde man added that he would not vouch for what might happen next. The boss lying on the floor tried to slow down the blonde man. Shin Yuan looked at him questioningly. The man asked what the cards were. The boss, feeling anger encompassing him, said that it was an unconventional hunter skill. He asked the blonde man what specialization he had. Smiling, Shin Yuan replied that he didn't know himself. After hesitating a bit and holding a golden card in front of him, he complimented that any card he drew would become his strength. Holding the card in front of him, he began to scrutinize it. It was a new card, Thunderstrike. Looking at the blonde man, the boss listened carefully to everything Shin Yuan told him, and offered to test this card on the blonde man. Suddenly, the yellow light once again illuminated the surroundings. Through the rays of this light, cries for mercy pierced through. The boss asked him not to do anything wrong, but Shin Yuan was no longer listening to him. In front of the guy was a view of a place to eat. All the signs were just so appetizing to the people passing by. Attilo, who was next to the blonde guy, saw this restaurant. Her eyes glazed over at what she saw. She confessed that she didn't even think that people had talent in cooking. She apologized for her words to the guy that she called him useless. Shin Yuan together with Attilo were looking at the mouth-watering food that stood in front of them. He once again gratefully reminded the girl that it was only because of her that he was alive. Tasting all the dishes, he was glad that the girl liked the food. Sitting at the table, Shin Yuan admitted that he didn't expect such an appetite from the goddess. She interrogated if he thought she was a spirit. He hesitantly replied that only he could see her. Placing the 3 cards in front of him, Shin Yuan admitted that he tried to summon the cards but could only summon 3. He didn't understand why this was happening. Attilo, after listening to the blonde man, assured him that this would be the case. After all, he was using her power, and afterwards, returning the power to her. At that moment, he could see the main cards right in front of him. Shin Yuan felt angry. He didn't understand why things were happening like this. Yelling at the goddess, the blonde tried to figure out why he had so few cards. How could he use them up so quickly? After all, he definitely remembered taking all the cards. The girl tried to calm him down. Attilo began to explain to the guy that he could use more of her power, as it was when summoning the immortal goddess that helped. But because the blonde was lucky, after the fight it all goes to the treasury, including the unused cards, and after the guy accumulates enough mister he can use the cards again. Shen Yuan listened curiously. Attilo advised that after recovering the mister, the guy should continue to go to the dungeon and hunt monsters. Looking at the goddess, Shin Yuan wondered how long it would take to recover the mister. Atullo, raising her index finger up, replied that his mister should recover by next week. The girl, after a little thought, added that if Shin Yuan wished to use the immortal goddess cards again, he would need about 2 years. Shin Yuan was surprised at what he heard. He began to deny his intentions. The goddess continued her narration. If the guy wanted to restore the mister, he could absorb the magic essence of the underground monsters. Pointing at the cards in front of him, the girl continued. The basic cards were just as good. Stone armor, speed increase, lack of fatigue were also useful cards, but the blonde guy didn't understand how the support cards would help fight the underground monsters. Thinking back on it, Atullo wondered if the guy had those cards. He looked at her in surprise, not understanding what cards she was talking about. Atullo took out a card that hung in the air right in front of Shin Yuan's face. The girl called this card a super rare card. The card had the demonic strike skill. The guy continued to watch and listen attentively. He remembered the one who was able to kill the entire team. The image of the devil who mercilessly killed everyone in the dungeon appeared in front of him. Atullo, showing the cards further, continued her story. The treasury of luck could be improved by slaying monsters. After the death of the enemy, a magic essence was placed in the card. Sometimes the hero could make a contract or get a part of the skills. Looking at the guy, she asked the most important question. Atullo asked if Shin Yuan would have the courage to sweep the dungeon with 4 cards in his hand. The guy saw those cards hanging in the air right in front of him. Shin Yuan and Atullo still continued to sit in the establishment the same way. From their table, the words of speed enhancement, endurance, stone armor once again rang out. Looking at the girl in front of him, he knew that his only attack card was this. Death blow. Shin Yuan took a bite from his dish. Atullo, watching Shin Yuan twitching, wondered if he was scared. The guy, holding food in one hand and cards in the other, realized that resources were limited. Atullo, while chewing, remembered this. Shin Yuan said with confidence in his voice that 4 cards were definitely enough for him to go to the dungeon. The boy tilted his head, saying that it was already time for them to head to the dungeon. A few moments later, the girl and the guy arrived at the dungeon, walking through the walls that resembled a cave. Shin Yuan assumed that such a smell was because the dwarves were decomposing. Atullo explained that such a smell was because this room was underground, a sewer where all the sewage flowed. Shin Yuan questioned if she was sure this was the place. He didn't understand if he would need to cross the hole to get in. Atullo assured him that the magic flowed there continuously. This was definitely the place. The blonde man looked ahead carefully. He questioned if the magical flow was really flowing there, even though the girl assured him it was. He didn't see anyone. Atullo assured him that there was a looking glass in the deeper part of the dungeon, and there was also a dimensional gateway. Extending her index finger upward, the goddess added that all the boy needed to do was activate the magical power. The key. Blue light swirled around the room. A light hole like a whirlpool appeared in front of them. Standing in front of it, Shin Yuan heard Atullo finishing her story as the door easily opened. Walking a little further, the blonde man saw various statues. Atullo welcomed him to a dungeon called the Sea Palace. The sweeping of the dungeon she would leave to him. The goddess offered to leave to the blonde man right then, if he thought it would be too difficult for him. Shin Yuan, after thinking for a bit, he asked where they were. Shin Yuan didn't immediately pay attention, but after hearing an unexpected sound, he turned his head. Suddenly, a huge beast that opened its mouth and tried to eat a large fish appeared in front of the blonde man's eyes. Getting closer to the edge, Shin Yuan was shocked by what he saw. He asked what it was. In front of them stood a huge lizard man. Atullo explained that on its own it didn't look strong, but it became dangerous when gathered in groups. If one was injured, the others would immediately intend to retaliate. Listening to this, Shin Yuan affirmatively exclaimed that they would kill this monster. Continuing to look at the lizard man, they concluded that the one in front of them was a so-called thresher. It chose strong and big friends to kill. Shin Yuan, holding the map in his hands, voiced that their battle plan would be annihilation by lethal strike. He planned to provoke them with words. Standing at the very edge of the cliff, the guy stuck out his tongue and imagined how he would taunt the entire group of monsters that had gathered in front of him. The blonde continued with his plan. When the monsters would chase them, they would activate the speed and stamina card. The guy was sure that this was the perfect plan. Shin Yuan continued to assure Atullo of his plan after they would gather all the monsters together. The death blow card was to kill all the monsters at once. After listening to all the details, Atullo remarked that it was a great strategy. As he continued his story, the guy looked at the cards he was holding in front of him. He recalled the moment when they couldn't kill the boss, because he didn't get a single shot, but he intended to level up first and then move on to the action. The blonde didn't notice how the lizard man was behind him. After hesitating a bit, the lizard man behind the guy startled him with a loud scream. After a couple of moments, Shin Yuan realized that the monster was behind him. The monster roared, sticking out its long bright tongue and preparing to attack the blonde. The guy didn't expect that his perfect plan that had been voiced earlier would require revisions. He was frightened, trying to take action. What would happen next? The monster was getting closer and closer. Shin Yuan quickly took out a map. He quickly threw the card, shouting, just 2 words, death blow. The monster began to disintegrate into pieces, screaming harder and harder. Holding the card in front of him, Shin Yuan felt how scared he was. He really thought he was going to die. The guy realized what a cool card just now helped save his life. Adelo quickly flew towards the guy, striking him. She angrily shouted that he was an idiot. The goddess kept nervously shouting that Shin Yuan used his main skill to kill the mob, getting hit and falling to the ground. The guy tried to justify himself, pointing at the cards in front of him. The goddess explained that the blonde guy should have used this card to kill the dungeon boss. After all, it was the only attack skill. But Shin Yuan used his only skill on an ordinary lizard man. Holding the card in his hand, the guy got excited when he saw the image on it. He said in a happy voice that the death blow didn't disappear from the card and they could use it again. Atullo, getting angry, shouted out that this card belonged to the blonde man, so it wouldn't disappear. He just used the full power of this card. Shin Yuan realized that he had made a mistake. A lightning realization came to him, which he immediately began to regret. The guy heard that before the full recovery. The cards were nothing. Atullo turned to the guy, and in a calm voice asked that he think for starters about how they were going to get out of here. After thinking for a bit, she said affirmatively that someone would come for Shin Yuan. He didn't realize who was supposed to come. Suddenly, abruptly, the paw of another monster was in front of the eyes of the guy and the goddess. Shin Yuan saw the monster rising up and approaching the guy. Atullo questioned if he was even listening to her. The monster started growling louder and louder. The boy and girl found themselves surrounded. The monsters were getting bigger and bigger. They wondered how they could escape. Atullo reminded them that these monsters lived in groups, and while they saw only a couple of monsters approaching them, the next monsters were crawling towards them from down below. Atullo suggested that she open the door and Shin Yuan prepared to run. He didn't want to do that. Shin Yuan blurted out that it was enough to wait. Thoughts were jumbled in his head and he kept thinking about what could be done. Taking out a card and looking at it, the guy smiled. He had found the answer to his questions. The card he held in his hand was better than one that could only be used once. The lizard men opened their mouths, baring their fangs and preparing to attack their victims that were in front of them. Shin Yuan made a decision that he should run. All the monsters started running after him. He realized that the screams of the monsters were different. The boy and girl found themselves surrounded by a large number of monsters, preparing to attack them and eat the guests that had gotten into the dungeon. The lizard men were getting closer and closer to them. Atullo shouted that sooner or later but the guy would be trapped. Hearing this, Shin Yuan said that this was just his second plan of possible developments. He was sure that one should always have a backup plan just in case. Bringing the map closer to him and about to attack the opponents, Shin Yuan said that this was his strategy. The map hung in the air. A shriek pierced the entire surroundings. All one word: deceleration. Suddenly, everything around them turned yellow in color. The monsters illuminated by the yellow light didn't crawl as fast. Shin Yuan realized that with the yellow area, they moved 100 times slower. Atullo reminded that even if the monsters slowed down, they still didn't have Death Strike, the only card that was capable of killing opponents. Watching as the monsters came slowly closer to Shin Yuan, he tried to find out if they didn't have that card. He thought he had said that that card could be useful too. Holding the cards in his hands and crossing his arms in front of him, the blonde man voiced his intentions. He was going to put a stone shield on their lizard brothers. Seeing the huge lizard change its body, Atullo rejoiced that an ordinary lizard was becoming equipped. Shin Yuan rejoiced that they wouldn't even need to get into a battle. Shin Yuan stretched out his hand and ordered the stone lizard to go forward and kill all the monsters. The stone lizard smoothly approached the lizard men. It was very angry and was ready to protect the people who summoned it. A paw with sharp claws slowly reached out towards the monsters. With a smooth motion, the stone lizard touched the enemy's head. The monster felt a wild pain from how hard it was grabbed. The boy and the goddess watched this with a questioning look on their faces. The stone lizard tried to straighten out its opponents. Each movement was smoother than the previous one. Shin Yuan and Atullo noticed how the actions of those fighting were too slow. Shin Yuan continued to watch the fight. He didn't understand why the slowdown was also affecting their lizard. Atalo exclaimed that the blonde was a fool, for he didn't realize that the slowdown was a zone and it didn't matter at all who was in it, friend or foe. The guy realized that their lizard had no advantage. Atalo was starting to get angry, asking the guy if he was really that stupid or just pretending. After thinking for a bit, she turned to the guy and asked if they had a reverse card. Shin Yuan didn't remember about this card at all. He wanted to save it before he escaped and had completely forgotten about it. Shin Yuan, holding the map in his hands together with Atalo, was heading towards the monster fight. He hoped that the map would give the stone lizard a chance to accelerate at an incredible speed. The stone lizard gained a unique power. It moved closer to the opponent and attacked him stronger than the previous one. Yellow rays lit up the whole place. The other monsters crowded around the two fighting and watched carefully what was happening. The stone lizard was killing every monster that caught its eye. The drops of blood spattered harder and harder. The monsters were dying one by one, not expecting such resistance from their enemy. The stone lizard was elusive. It had extraordinary speed and strength. Atelo noticed that apart from the magic crystal, they were getting many other marvelous things such as claw, skin, tail, lizard card. Shin Yuan rejoiced that with such speed, they would soon be able to fill the cards with magic. Atelo praised the guy's work. He rejoiced that he was really strong. Atalo smiled after hearing Shin Yuan's words. She thought for a while and came to the realization that what was happening was taking an interesting turn. Hovering in the air in front of the blonde man, Atalo thought he was just a fool who relied on simple luck to live a little longer. But she didn't expect at all that Shin Yuan would be so resourceful and be able to combine cards so skillfully. She didn't realize if he was brave or clever, but it wasn't that important. Atalo wondered what other interesting things the guy could pull off. The place where they stood was illuminated by bright red flashes. The stone lizard roared loudly and held its opponent tightly by the head, delivering another blow. Shin Yuan noticed that the time zone was over. The yellow light stopped illuminating everything. Atalo asked him not to be nervous and turned around. The monsters suddenly stopped and breathed loudly. Each breath was clearly audible. The stone lizard stood in front of all the others. Looking at them, the boy and the goddess realized that those lizards that remained alive were oppressed by fear. The stone lizard took in air and shouted even louder than he had done before. He was even angrier. The monsters, sensing the danger and their impending death, made the decision to flee without turning back. Shin Yuan couldn't believe that he had won. Golden cards appeared in front of the guy. Taking one card in his hands, he looked at them questioningly, not realizing what they were. Looking at the cards once more, the blonde guy asked again if they were new cards. He continued to scrutinize what was in his hands. He tried to make a guess. After hesitating a bit, the guy tried to say what he realized, continuing to hold the cards in front of his face and the face of the goddess. When they saw the image that was on the cards, they realized that all of them depicted lizards. They didn't understand why they needed so many cards. Something abruptly caught the boy's attention. He didn't realize what started to happen. The golden light started to be much brighter. The cards flew out of the guy's hand one after another. Being in shock, the blonde didn't know what happened. The stone lizard began to shine brighter. It seemed as if it was enveloped by fire from all sides. Suddenly, a new lizard appeared in front of Shin Yuan and Atalo's eyes. They carefully continued to look and saw that all the lizards had been consumed. Shin Yuan realized that it was the armored lizard from the past in front of them. The stone lizard from the past had evolved, gaining a new species. The blonde man decided to check the map he had in his hands. He realized that it was a new power, for the image on the map had changed. A system alert came for Atalo and Shin Yuan. The armored lizard had completed its evolution, reaching the highest rank, called Armored Dragon, as well as the dragon blood racial skills such as top-class regeneration, durability, and elemental armor. Atalo was surprised by the Armored Dragon. She thought a bit about the fact that it was a new species and it brought a smile to her face. Atalo continued to smile as she thought it over. She laughed loudly while she was in the air above the guy. He turned around and asked what happened. Why did she start laughing? Was the new look weak? She apologized for her laughter. The girl just didn't expect someone to create a new species using creativity. It seemed very interesting to her. She couldn't help herself. Shin Yuan along with the goddess continued to walk further. They started to walk down the steps. Something green appeared in front of him. It was glowing with a bright light and resembled a plant. Atalo continued her story. That top-class generation, durability and elemental armor were not bad skills. If an armored dragon acquired all these skills, although these skills were protective, Shin Yuan walked beside it, going lower and lower, listening attentively. The girl added that the armored dragon was something that the guy was able to summon, which also meant that the soul was bound to the blonde man. Thus the armored dragon skills could be added to Shin Yuan's body. The blonde man was confused at all. His head was splitting. He didn't understand if he was bound to the lizard soul. Atalo expected this. She explained that even if he wasn't able to use all the skills, thanks to the armored dragon, the guy wouldn't be easy to kill at all. Shin Yuan was starting to understand, but he had a question. He dared to ask. From the moment his soul was bound to him, would he not become a lizard man or one with him? Attilo laughed involuntarily, laughing louder and louder, holding her stomach in pain. The girl was right in front of the guy. Shin Yuan shared that he felt like he was being ridiculed. Attilo explained that his strength was the reason for her presence. She added that his true soul was connected to her. That is God. He should have felt honored. After all, he was immortal. Shin Yuan was starting to get confused by all the information he had heard. Attilo suggested that they postpone the conversation until later. They walked down to the bottom. In front of them was a staircase that led to a statue of an obscure figure. The goddess explained that they had reached their destination. They tried to scrutinize the statue that was at the very top. Attilo added that the place they came to was the deepest point of the dungeon. That is the boss room. Looking up, Shin Yuan asked if he should fight the thing that was the statue. Attila said that it was just a statue, and that bastard's personality wouldn't allow him to fight people. Shin Yuan reminded himself of all the things he had gone through and experienced. He thought that he should have been more careful. He had already been killed by those monster statues recently. The boy thought over the words he heard. He asked if Attila was familiar with the god she called a bastard. She tried to think over her answer. After hesitating a bit, she added that she didn't know anyone who could be as ugly and shameless as a frog. Shin Yuan thought that the goddess words sounded like she was familiar. Shin Yuan remembered something else. He decided to recall that this was the place where the lizard had escaped to. Suddenly the lizards started to appear one by one. Watching the lizards watched with caution. It seemed that the monsters were wary of the armored lizard. Shin Yuan made the decision that if the monsters blocked his path, he would have to let them feel the power of his new card. Some sound alerted the young lad's attention. The silhouette of a huge monster that was similar to a devil and had red bright eyes abruptly appeared. Shin Yuan stood beside the goddess. Behind them, the monster, which had red bright stripes all over its body, raised one of its paws, firmly holding a weapon. The guy slowly raised his head upwards. The huge monster tried to strike the blonde guy. The red light blinded the guy and the goddess. Attilo shouted loudly for the guy to quickly dodge and run away. The huge monster raised its weapon even higher. The red light changed to firelight. Shin Yuan found himself right in front of the monster. He realized that apparently it was the dungeon boss. The monster's eyes began to glow even brighter. The monster, seeing the guy in front of him, was preparing to attack, saying something. Shin Yuan interrogated what the monster was saying. He didn't understand, but he could definitely tell that the monster was angry. Taking out a golden card and placing it in front of him, Shin Yuan tried to warn the monster not to fixate on him. The lizard that evolved started trying to attack the monster that was trying to kill the guy and the goddess. The lizard and the monster ended up facing each other, scrutinizing his opponent's every move. The lizard delivered a blow to the monster's head. Shin Yuan reminded it that this was exactly what was expected. Watching the monster bite into the lizard's arm, Shin Yuan continued that things were not going to be easy in this battle. It seemed to the blonde guy that the monster knew what he was up to. The guy shouted for the lizard to come back faster. It was an armored dragon. It wasn't worth attacking. Shin Yuan watched the two enemies fight. Attilo realized that it wasn't that simple. Shin Yuan asked the goddess what it meant. Why was this monster different from normal bosses? Attilo, after thinking for a bit, replied that this lizard was smart. So, it was a bit different and now it was a dragon. The girl continued her story. This boss that was in front of them had high intelligence. This monster was a class hero. The dragon tried to say something. Its eyes burst into flames. The dragon managed to say that it relinquished its hand while the huge monster bit it, not letting go but clenching its fangs on it more and more. The dragon shouted loudly and let out a blue flame aimed at the monster. The monster took the blow from its opponent right in the eye. Feeling intense pain, blood splattered in all directions. The dragon injured the monster, but its hand still remained in the monster's mouth. Blood flooded all around. The lizard trying to get out. Shin Yuan, carefully watching what was happening, shouted out just two words, "Armored dragon." One paw with claws became on the floor. It was the paw of the armored dragon. The dragon landed on the floor in front of Shin Yuan. The guy shouted that the dragon's hand was no longer there. Atalo said that the card had its own consciousness. The dragon had made its own judgment. She questioningly said that the dragon had given up its own arm to survive. The huge monster became even angrier. He began to scream loudly, throwing his weapons in different directions, cursing everyone and intending to kill them. Everyone watched carefully the further actions of his enemy. The monster felt pain in his eyes. The red light on his body grew brighter and brighter. The monster shouted loudly that it would kill them all. The red light blinded everyone around. Shin Yuan asked Atalo if the fog cleared, what could that battle roar have been? Atalo blurted out that it wasn't just a battle roar, but a skill. After hesitating a bit, she added that it was a true leadership skill. The monster was calling all the creatures to help. The monsters, upon hearing the roar, left their fear behind and were ready to come to the leader's aid. The armored dragon, Shin Yuan and Atalo found themselves surrounded. Monsters were everywhere, on every side. They realized that this was a trap for them. Atalo turned to Shin Yuan saying that she had found out something. He looked at her questioningly. She continued, "This place was the Sea Palace. This is the territory of the Sea God and also the territory of that divine bastard who was sitting at the top of the stairs." Shin Yuan listened carefully to the goddess' words. He didn't quite understand what she was trying to say. She explained that with this bastard, they were similar. The bastard was sealed in the statue. "It's the boss's guard." Turning to the guy, she said if he wished to awaken him, all he had to do was destroy the vessel. But thinking about that bastard, the girl was getting goosebumps. Shin Yuan apologized for that. Atalo pleased the guy that the treasure trove of luck was already fully replenished. The blonde had already managed to get the gold card in his hands by then. Turning to the dragon, he said that he trusted the boss to be the one. The dragon heard what the guy said and tried to agree with it while looking at the blonde man. Shin Yuan shouted to the dragon to be bold. The armored dragon started to attack the monster once more. Bright beams of yellow light from the dragon's eyes became visible to everyone. The guy holding the map in his hands anticipated the lizardman's attack and stood alert. Shin Yuan launched the first card. The first card had the ability to increase its speed. The monster roared to the rest of the monsters to stop the guy. Shin Yuan, having gained speed, started running even faster and faster. With incredible speed, the guy ran closer and closer. He was covering the distance with lightning speed. The monster roared to prevent the guy from being allowed to get there. The monster tried to fend off the monster's attack by roaring that it was the monster itself that would be the guy's main opponent. The armored dragon stood abruptly in front of the monster's huge eye, wondering how he could overpower his opponent. The dragon kicked at the monster's head. The blue light dazzled all around. The armored dragon roared that it would kill the monster. The monster pulled its paws and roared that it would kill the dragon faster, calling it a bloody brat. The monster's weapons dealt heavy blows one after another. The weapons blazed with fire. Red beams of bright light showed the dragon's resistance. It screamed louder and louder for the dragon to die. The dragon roared that as long as he was there, he would not let the monster get close to his master. The armored dragon jumped, preparing to strike his opponent. The blue paw, shrouded in a bright blue light, came closer and closer to his foe. Striking one by one, the dragon overpowered the monster, illuminating everything around it with bright rays. The armored dragon decided to step back a bit to gain strength for another attack. The monster, stepping back a bit from the blow, roared even louder for the dragon to die. The dragon stood, gaining strength and contemplating the next steps of its attack on the enemy. Something abruptly caught the dragon's attention and it looked around. Seeing Shin Yuan running towards the statue, the armored dragon remembered its master. After a moment, watching the guy approaching at an incredible speed towards his target, the dragon realized that he had to protect his master. Shin Yuan, almost reaching his target with Atalo behind him, laughed as he saw the lizardmen trying to catch up with him. Turning to the statue, the guy uttered the words, "God of Greed." Carefully studying the figure of the stone, he turned to the statue and said he had come. Shin Yuan carefully looked ahead of him, trying to study what he saw in front of him. Atalo tried to find out what Shin Yuan thought about everything. After examining everything that was going on around him, Shin Yuan realized that their matters were not good. Feeling pain in his body, Shin Yuan bent towards the ground. Unable to stay on his feet, the guy started falling down. Atalo watched what was happening, trying to figure out what happened. The blonde was able to tell that his body was getting weaker. Flying closer, the goddess asked if the guy was alive. Shin Yuan, lying on the ground, explained that his body wasn't obeying him at all. Attilo yelled for the blonde boy to get up quickly. The lizards came closer and closer to them. They were preparing their attack on their victims, slowly approaching. The monsters lined up began to growl and run, following their opponents. Attilo realized what happened to the guy. She knew the reason. It was all because his body used the speed increase and exhausted the limit. That's why he fell down. Shin Yuan said that it was because the goddess cards were difficult to use. Attilo didn't agree. The golden cards once again hung in the air, one in front of the other. The guy shouted out, "Treasure luck." Hearing this, the lizards realized that something was going on and the guy and the goddess were plotting something against them. The guy pulled out one card, a blast of north wind. A strong stream of wind knocked the lizards off their feet. They flew backwards. Noticing how the guy was able to overpower his opponents, he realized it was a good card. Attilo explained that it was the north wind. The North Wind card was capable of summoning a strong tornado to attack, which could help win the victory. Attilo explained further that no matter who, whether it was glowing rats or large dragons, they could all be blown away. So was a specialty. Shin Yuan, hearing the goddess start to procrastinate, tried to hurry her up so she could continue to say what the specialty was. Attilo finished that the north wind only had the effect of blowing away. It couldn't do any damage while watching the lizards fly away. Shin Yuan abruptly fell to his knees. He didn't realize how the support card in front of him was in front of him again. Turning to the guy, the goddess explained that it was all because he was too greedy and took all the cards. He should have been ashamed. Attilo continued to explain. If the blonde guy had drawn just one card back then, he could summon the goddess of war whenever he wished. After listening to everything, Shin Yuan asked what would have happened if he had drawn a bad card back then. The goddess said that there would be nothing to worry about then either. Her cards have a backup for newcomers. He needed to quickly find a way to release the bastard that was sitting at the top of the stairs. Getting closer, the guy realized that the bastard was a bit big. The blonde once again saw the lizards that were spinning in the air. He wondered why the north wind was spinning them right over their heads. It still wasn't blowing very pleasantly. Attilo replied that the north wind has a high duration, but its weakness is that it has no definite direction. It blows in random directions. The monster that had recovered from the armored dragon's past attacks roared loudly, attracting attention. Attilo and Shin Yuan heard the loud shout and howl and remembered about the boss. Getting a little worried, Shin Yuan carefully looked forward. He saw something that shocked him greatly. The monster, holding his weapon in one hand, was coming closer and closer to them, with an armored dragon in his other hand. Realizing that it was real, the guy tried to call out to the armored dragon. The guy's eyes were no longer glowing with yellow rays. He was immobilized by the monster's tight grip. The monster decided to throw the dragon away, flinging it high and turning away. The dragon rolled on the ground for a few meters, lying on its back and not moving at all while doing so. Shin Yuan once again tried to call out to the armored dragon, but was abruptly heard to take care, for the monster was advancing. The huge gray monster was rushing towards its opponents at an incredible speed. The huge gray paw was crushing everything in its path, claws clinging to the ground, creating large cracks. The monster, weapon in hand, covered the distance to its target faster and faster. Shin Yuan and Attilo stood there wondering what they could do. The lizards so and so circled in the air around them. Attilo shouted for the guy to be more careful, for the monster was getting closer. Shin Yuan grabbed the map and asked if he could use it again. Attilo asked to wait, asking what card was in his hand. The monster approached Shin Yuan, swinging his weapon. The guy shouted once more, taking out a card. He shouted, "Speed increase." Shin Yuan felt a sharp pain. The strength started to leave his body. He felt himself getting weaker and weaker. Attilo shouted. If Shin Yuan forcefully used the card, his body wouldn't be able to endure it. Holding the card in his hand, the guy started to slowly back away, falling to the ground. Attilo tried to call out to him. Blood was coming from his mouth in a thin trickle. Sharp yellow rays of light brightly illuminated everything around them. The confrontation between the monster and the guy illuminated everything with flashes of light, blinding everyone around. The monster tried to inflict more damage to his enemy. Shin Yuan, having gained immense strength, jumped high, striking the monster in the head. The monster felt the guy's foot was between its eyes. It got even angrier. Shin Yuan continued to deliver blow after blow, illuminating everything with yellow beams of light. As he realized, stats and status were not important. Watching everything happen, Shin Yuan added that it was all unimportant at that moment. It was all about willpower, gaining incredible speed. The guy quickly found himself above the monster's head. Attilo looked at everything that was happening and realized that the guy was using the lizard as a prop to jump. seeing the new cards behind her. Atelo didn't realize what they were. Abruptly, Shin Yuan found himself high above the statue. The monster realized that the blonde was up to something. He kept watching the guy, taking the card in his hand. Shin Yuan shouted that this would be the third time, gaining incredible speed. Shin Yuan found himself very high up. A yellow beam of light emerged from the bowl that the statue was holding. The lizards were still spinning in the air the same way. The fiery light broke the rocks, breaking through them higher and higher. Shin Yuan found himself right by the rock, quickly flying up to him. The goddess tried to find out if he was alive. The guy replied that thanks to his armored dragon support skills, he barely managed to survive. Atelo reminded him that he didn't have to take any risks. They could just open the teleportation gate and retreat. Shin Yuan explained that someone like him living at the very bottom wouldn't miss a single chance to become stronger. Looking at everything around him, the guy replied that it was time to come out. Getting down on one knee in front of the monster, the guy tried to summon the god of expectancy. Gray smoke enveloped the entire dungeon. No one could see what was going on. Suddenly the statue became alive, shouting the words, "Not enough, never enough, not enough money, not enough fun, not enough sleep." The gray smoke changed to purple. The monster watched all the changes carefully. With one eye, the monster tried to see what had happened to the statue. The statue became gigantic and reached its tongue out, screaming loudly that everything was completely missing. The monster stood right in front of the bastard's mouth. Purple smoke changed to pink smoke. Only one word came through the smoke: devoured. Watching all the action, Atelo remarked that it was, as always, disgusting. Shin Yuan asked if it was the power of a god. The girl told him not to be so surprised. After all, he was using the power of a god. The creature that was a stone looked down carefully. Pink flames began to rapidly move through the air, coming closer and closer to the guy and girl. Looking down, the creature was very surprised. He didn't expect to see who was in front of him. Turning away, Atelo nervously folded his hands in front of him. Shin Yuan asked again if it was about him. The creature said it had been waiting for centuries. Its dream had finally been fulfilled. It was so touched. Gradually approaching the guy and girl, Shin Yuan noticed that it was very close. Trying to step back, the creature shouted words at the girl. "My beloved and much revered goddess, Atelo Boros." The goddess hovered in the air, crossing her arms in front of her, looking at the monster with anger. Covering its nose with her hand, she addressed the creature that it could only open its mouth in human form. Its disgusting breath beat directly against her nose. Feeling himself, the creature said that he was as expected, still the same as his toxic goddess, never changed. He asked to wait for a while to change form. At that moment, Shin Yuan asked Atelo if it was her fan. She rudely asked him to shut up. If he repeated his words again, she would no longer help the guy. The creature shouted loudly that here it comes, calling the goddess by the wrong name. Getting angry, she corrected her name, asking for her name not to be twisted again. Abruptly, the creature began to transform. Pink flames illuminated all around it. Atelo and Shin Yuan covered their eyes from the bright light as they watched the transformation. Shin Yuan was surprised by what he saw in front of him. Suddenly, a girl appeared in front of them, shouting that everything was out. The transformation was successful. The pink smoke was beginning to slowly evaporate. Atelo turned to the one across from her. She didn't realize what kind of look the one who had only recently been a statue had. The creature in the girl's body spoke. This body he had bargained for in fair trade. Now he was using it. Turning to Atelo, he asked if it was not bad. Overall, it was nicer compared to the previous ones. The girl that appeared in front of them fell on Shin Yuan, continuing to sit on him. She spoke further. The creature in the girl's body heard a whisper that asked to move its legs. Abruptly, the creature got to its feet, saying that it had forgotten who the guy was. Atelo asked if the guy was alright. He replied that it was a side effect, asking for some rest. The creature took a closer look at the guy. It realized it was a human. Turning to the goddess, the creature in the girl's body said it realized what was wrong, calling the goddess a contractor. Atelo asked if it would immediately reveal its true appearance. Half of the girl's face turned black. The creature in the girl's body. It asked how much grace Shin Yuan received from the treasury of fate. Atelo, after thinking for a bit, replied for the creature to give up and not dream, for the treasury of fate will not provide him with a single card. Shin Yuan heard him being addressed, calling him little brother. he slowly turned his head. Shin Yuan heard the creature asking how he was feeling. It apologized for what happened, reminding him that it was what saved him from that big lizard. The blonde man turned around. He was quite surprised. After all, he was the one who freed the creature, turning it from a stone into a living human. The creature decided that it needed to repeat some things. Shin Yuan noticed how everything abruptly started spinning in front of his eyes. The blonde man fell to the floor, not at all expecting what would happen next. The creature that was before reappeared, shrouding everything around with pink smoke. It once again shouted that it was it that saved the guy, implying that it was time to return the favor. Shin Yuan interjected that it was the one who had saved him. Getting closer to the guy, the creature that was in the girl's body asked the guy to give him the treasure trove of destiny in repayment of the debt, asking how he felt about the offer. Atalo in a menacing voice told the creature to stop. The god was not allowed to use power to intimidate ordinary people, to which the creature just laughed. The god asked Atalo not to get angry. When he got the cards of the guy from the treasure trove of destiny, then they could make a contract when the time came if they worked together. After all, the owner of the body the god used was still alive. The god started laughing loudly. Atalo didn't realize what the jokes were. Even if she was thrown to the edge of the universe, she still wouldn't wish to have any dealings with the god. The god laughed, even though he respected Atalo. Trade was trade. If he saved the guy's life, the blonde had to pay for it. Shin Yuan turned to the god. If the god wanted to pay back, the guy offered to make a deal. He understood that the god wanted his card. Standing in front of the god and looking into his eyes, Shin Yuan asked what the god could give the blonde guy in return. The god called the guy brave. He asked if he thought he had something worthy to negotiate with him. After a bit of silence, Shin Yuan added that he couldn't give the guy everything, but the guy added that he could give the god some cards to satisfy him. The blonde guy placed the cards in front of the god. The god scrutinized the cards that were in front of him. He was glad that there were so many of them. Atalo tried to stop the blonde guy. After all, he couldn't do that. The guy said if the god wanted the cards, then let him have them. Reaching his hand higher and higher, the god started to slowly walk towards them. Atalo explained that it was the god of greed. The guy couldn't bargain with him, for the god could suck everything out of the blonde guy. Shin Yuan saw nothing wrong with that and asked to provide it all to him. The god asked if the guys were interested in the issue of Atalo Boros regaining strength. They hesitated a little with the answer and thought about it. Atalo heard the god warn her about the possible dominance of fate. Turning to the blonde man, the god explained that if Atalo got her strength back, the guy could also become stronger. Shin Yuan pondered what he heard. The god could tell the method of regaining strength for 2 cards. The salvation fee was only 1 card, and a total of 3 cards would be needed. He thought it was reasonable. Atalo, after hearing all the words, said that the deal was not fair. She did not accept it. Shin Yuan asked if he just wanted the cards from the treasury. Atalo waited for his further decisions. The goddess thought over all the blonde man's words again. Something caught her attention. She went over the words in her head again and again. Shin Yuan turned to the god and said that he would give him 7 cards, but the god of greed had to promise not to lie to him. The god was surprised that the guy offered him as many as 7 cards. Shin Yuan reiterated what he had said earlier. He said that he would get 7 cards from the treasury and give them to him. Shin Yuan waited for the god's response, repeating once again that he was willing to give the 7 cards. The god pondered over the offer. It was more than 3 cards, for a total of 4 cards. Shin Yuan remembered that he had killed a few lizards earlier. Now he realized what he could do with them. Atalo tried to object, but the guy asked if she wanted to intimidate him. It wouldn't be that easy. She asked him not to be so overconfident. God realized that was kind of weird. He asked the guy why he decided to give him as many as 7 cards instead of 3. God continued. He understood that the addition shouldn't consist of 1 more card or twice 6 cards. He asked again, why 7 cards? What could it mean? Why the blonde guy was going to give him exactly 7 cards? Shin Yuan tried to explain. The blonde man pondered everything he heard. He just wanted to fuse the lizard cards. He didn't expect the god of greed to be so perceptive at all. The pink smoke once again enveloped the surroundings. Shin Yuan stood in the center of the smoke, hearing the words that he was a fraud. The offer was a scheme. The 7 cards could activate something. Humans were cunning. The god said loudly that he needed an answer from the human. If the guy was going to outsmart him, he could promise that his worst curse would fall on the blonde. Atalo tried to explain to the goddess that the guy would just give up the 7 cards he was incapable of using. The goddess called the guy a weakling, adding that many of the cards in the treasury were useless to him. Shin Yuan started to get angry. He didn't realize if it was normal to say such things to the god of greed. The god, after thinking for a bit, realized that the girl wasn't lying to him. The god of greed agreed to the guy's proposal. Shin Yuan didn't expect it to work at all. Atelo saw Shin Yuan's facial expression change. She asked him not to be so scared. She continued that from the beginning. The only thing the god was thinking about was the treasury cards. If it didn't violate the rules of the god deal, the guy wouldn't be punished. The god turned to the guys. If they were going to reduce the number of cards, he would not be okay with that at all. Atelo called the god not just greedy but stupid, only he was cheated. Next time he would be more careful and cautious. The god of greed turned to the young man. It was a huge pity that the guy had no talent, so the god could help rid the guy of his trash. Shin Yuan agreed with what the god said. Shin Yuan held out the 7 cards to the god as they agreed. The god laughed out loud. The god of greed rejoiced that from that day onwards, he too would be a god wielding the power of fate. He was about to look at the cards he had. After carefully looking at the cards, the god realized that something was wrong. All 7 cards had lizards on them. The god asked why the guy in the treasure trove of fate had those particular cards. Shen Yuan reached closer, asking for forgiveness for the disturbance. The god realized it was all foul and wrong. Atelo and Shin Yuan, smiling, pretended not to understand what was being discussed. The god got the cards. They claimed they were real shots of fate. Atelo asked, "Wasn't everything God said?" The fate cards were given to him. The god of greed couldn't break the rule of the contract. Shin Yuan recalled the god's words that the deal was fair. The god of greed shouted that the 2 of them were devils. The god shouted that the guy and the girl were cruel. They were more terrible than the devil. The 7 lizards sat in front of the god. Opposite them stood Shin Yuan, the armored dragon, and Atelo. The god interrogated if the guys could evolve into one like Shin Yuan had. Shin Yuan confirmed. He said that if you give them love, they would reciprocate the same. They could grow into what he wanted them to be. God said that he had incurred a loss from this transaction. He would pay double next time. The god sat on the lizard and addressed everyone ahead of him. He promised to show Shin Yuan the real evolution of the lizards. The god abruptly and quickly swept away from those who remained in their seats. Pink smoke enveloped everyone. Atelo said at that moment they had to take the dungeon energy. She asked the guy if he knew the exact location. Shin Yuan, after thinking for a bit, replied that he knew the location of the dungeon energy. But there was a problem. Shin Yuan continued. If he remembered correctly, the dungeon was under the protection of the hunter's office. Atelo tried to remember which office was being talked about. She asked again if it was the place where and by whom he was caught earlier. In the hunter's office, there were those who used the name of justice to protect people and cut off people's paths to get money. Exploring the high-rank dungeon was also part of their duties. Shin Yuan said that Atelo needed the approval of the hunters before entering the dungeon. For those who didn't get approval had a special name. Abruptly, a man from the hunter's office appeared in front of the 3 in the dungeon. Finishing Shin Yuan's words, he called those who didn't get approval an illegal hunter, a bandit. The man said, "Here they meet again," calling the guy a shithead, presenting upwards a fist that was blazing with flames. Shin Yuan realized that some shit was going on. The man swept up as they met again. He asked if the guy would still claim that he didn't know anything about martial arts. Shin Yuan tried to find out how the hunter was able to enter where they were. The girl that Shin Yuan had also seen in the hunter's office appeared in front of them. She asked if the managers of that dungeon needed permission to enter. Standing in front of Shin Yuan and the armored dragon, the girl continued her story. They had discovered a strange magical cause, so they decided to go and check it out. The blonde guy was already familiar with it. He tried to address the staff of the hunter's office. The girl greeted the guy. They met again. Last time the man was too hurried and didn't introduce himself. The girl's name was Chio and the big guy's name was Xiaoyu. Shin Yuan tried to clarify if the girl who was standing in front of him now was the secretary. She laughed loudly. She was also a hunter. She mostly stopped the big guy from going berserk. Sometimes she did the secretary's job. The big guy told Chio not to waste her time chatting with the guy. Shin Yuan asked Ms. Chio to stop Sir Xiaoyu. He was about to leave first. The blonde guy heard him being addressed, calling him an asshole. He started to slowly turn his head. Hot orange-red flames doused the entire room. Sir Xiaoyu said that when they came, there was no trace of the bosses left. Xiaoyu, standing in the flames, asked the blonde man why someone like him with low status was able to sweep the dungeon. Shin Yuan, looking at the flames that transformed into a tiger. He didn't understand what was going on. Atelo said that it was a top-rank spirit. The goddess said that it was unexpected, but Xiaoyu had contracted a top-rank spirit. Xiao asked Xiaoyu to take it easy so that he wouldn't kill it, to which the man replied that it all depended on his strength. Xiaoyu asked for permission to find out just how strong Shin Yuan was. Suddenly trying to attack the young lad, the man flew forward, calling the blonde man a dumb brat. Shin Yuan was surprised by what he saw. The armored dragon became Shin Yuan's defense, covering him with himself. Xiaoyu began his attack, leaping over the heads of those in front of him. Xiaoyu saw the monster protecting the guy. This caught his attention. Why did the dragon become on the defense? Xiaoyu attacked the armored dragon, delivering blow after blow. Tongues of flames engulfed all around. The armored dragon took the blows, trying to strike back at his opponent. Xiaoyu saw his flames begin to disappear as they came into contact with the armored dragon. This really caught Xiaoyu's attention. It seemed very interesting to him. Xiaoyu, while continuing to strike, shouted for the little lizard to show what it was made of. Xiao although asked Xiaoyu to be easy on the monster guy, but surprisingly, that monster was immune to Xiaoyu's flames. Xiao continued to think about what she saw. Xiaoyu's spirit, it is a flame emperor. Although it gives off flames that can be seen everywhere, she pondered. Xiao understood that ordinary fire burns a person at a high temperature, and the flame of the flame emperor uses will, coming into contact with which it would not extinguish. Xiao, after thinking it over, came to the conclusion that the lizard that Xiaoyu fought was the type of monster that has immunity to flame. Shin Yuan and Atalo watched the fight between the two opponents carefully. The dragon was so strong, he could fight it for many rounds. The blonde man didn't think that the dragon was so strong. Atalo explained that it wasn't the armored dragon that was stronger, it was their skills blocking Xiaoyu's ability. Looking at the armored dragon, Atalo continued that the enemy's ability, it was the flame that granted it a spirit, and the armored dragon element was what spirits hated the most. They were already wondering if this was their chance to win. Atalo thought that even if everything was taken into account, the difference in their strength was too great. Shin Yuan looked questioningly in front of him. The armored dragon, trying to defend himself and his men, realized that the man he was fighting was much stronger than the large lizard. The dragon scrutinized his opponent, trying to figure out the best way for him to strike Xiaoyu. The armored monster attacked the man engulfed in flames from all sides. The dragon felt Xiaoyu strike back at him. The monster flew several meters away from Xiaoyu, ending up lying on the ground. Xiaoyu did not expect that the monster had stamina. He shouted for the monster to get up. The man wished to continue. Unexpectedly, Xiaoyu heard a loud call for him. Xiao reminded the man that he had forgotten their main objective. They needed to ask quickly and find out how the guy was able to clear the dungeon. Xiaoyu remembered it. Shin Yuan quickly ran up to his monster. He tried to find out how the armored dragon felt. Xiaoyu was watching. Shin Yuan heard him being called out, calling him a brat. Xiaoyu wished to know something right at that moment. The man asked what kind of relationship the young lad had together with the lizard who was so protective of the blonde man. Shin Yuan, watching as the dragon fell to the floor from the blows, tried to help the armored dragon. Xiaoyu once again called out to Shin Yuan. The man didn't understand why the monster was risking his life to save the blonde man. Who was the young lad? Shin Yuan wondered if Xiaoyu's goal was to capture the guy. The blonde guy sitting above the armored dragon understood. The motive of those who appeared beside them was not to apprehend him because of an illegal raid, but to understand why a weakling like him was able to sweep the dungeon. Shin Yuan didn't understand what he should do, whether he should tell them about the Destiny Treasury. But what would they do to him if he told them? Atalo realized what the guy was thinking. She told him to try to keep himself safe. He couldn't tell them about them. The goddess warned, even if they were connected, the guy couldn't be sure they wouldn't take his cards. Shin Yuan didn't know what to do at all. He didn't want a bounty on his head or a wanted poster of him hanging all over the streets. Atalo said for the guy to just confess what he did. It's just being locked up for a year and a half. The young guy didn't want what he heard. Xiaoyu wondered what the brat was muttering to himself. Xiao stood behind the man, waiting for the young guy to answer. Xiaoyu began to get angrier and angrier. The man shouted that it didn't matter. Shin Yuan and the lizard should have gone with him. They would question them thoroughly when they returned. The armored dragon felt a new burst of strength for the next battle. A skill called top-class regeneration was activated. The elemental armor skill absorbed the fire elements and reached its limit. Xiaoyu realized that something was going wrong. Something abruptly caught his attention. The armored dragon once again launched its attack on the man. Shin Yuan couldn't believe his eyes. He tried to call out to the monster that was protecting him. The armored dragon turned red. There was an irreversible process of improving the elemental armor skill with a chance of gaining a new skill. Atalo, looking at what was happening, realized that the dragon had swallowed the flame power and evolved again. Xiaoyu questioned the dragon if the dragon had absorbed its flame and turned red. The dragon became like a lobster. striking each other blow after blow. Xiaoyu realized that the dragon had not only turned red, its speed had become 3 times faster. Xiao watched everything that was happening. It was incredible. Monsters were able to evolve. The dragon had its own consciousness and desire to protect humans. Xiao realized that she was getting closer to the answer to her questions. What she was looking for so much. Xiao realized that Shin Yuan found the unknown goddess area and was captured when it was first. The dungeon had rank up or the highest difficulty. There was a lot of gold inside. That's when they decided to subvert and take all the treasures for themselves. Also, the dungeon managers discovered that the ancient evil demon could revive. The difficulty immediately increased to S rank and they all started to keep it secret. Some of the information leaked because of a group of illegal spies. They tried to stop them but it was already too late. Xiao kept thinking that after the group entered, none of them were seen again, except for Shin Yuan. Those main members were a rank, but only the blonde guy survived. Looking at the young guy, Xiao only found one explanation. Shin Yuan had obtained some unknown power in the dungeon. That was how he was able to sweep the dungeon. The red armored dragon was preparing for another strike. Xiaoyu could feel how this duel was starting to amuse him more and more. They continued to strike at each other. Each time the opponents became more and more painful. Blow after blow was taken by the dragon. Xiaoyu also took the blows. As the two enemies continued to fight, everyone who looked at them had the feeling that they were not going to give up at all. Xiaoyu was becoming more interesting to fight with such an opponent. The man thought that it had been a long time since he had met such an opponent. He had only been testing the dragon, and now it was time for the monster to see Xiaoyu's true strength. Relaxing his fist slightly, Xiaoyu flexed his fingers. The flames that represented the tiger behind Xiaoyu dazzled everyone around. The man got down on one knee, reaching forward and going to try out another skill. Looking carefully ahead, the man thought of a punch. Striking this next new blow was going to end everything. The dragon was preparing for another attack from the man. Flames lit up all around. Xiaoyu roared loudly as he attacked his enemy. Shin Yuan took out a card. It was a speed increase card. Watching his monster and Xiaoyu battle, Shin Yuan shouted for the dragon to dodge at all costs. The red dragon heard every word his master spoke. The dragon's paw stepped on the ground. It tried to catch its breath a bit and prepare for the next round of their fight. The dragon gained incredible speed, delivering blow after blow to Xiaoyu. Abruptly the man struck the ground where he was sitting. The dragon flew high up. Everything around it began to break apart. Shin Yuan didn't understand how the man had cracked the ground in the dungeon with one hand. Xiaoyu carefully looked at everything around him. Thoughts flew through everyone's mind as to whether or not the guy was definitely human. Stones fell down one after another, abruptly flying up and falling down. Xiaoyu was in the center. Blue rays of light engulfed everything around. The man continued to strike, continuing to split the ground of the dungeon. Shin Yuan along with the armored dragon waited to see what would happen next, while Xiaoyu continued to smash everything he touched. Xiao stood behind the man, continuing to watch what the man was doing. Turning to the blonde man, Xiaoyu tried to find out what the guy had done. The man continued to crumble the stones he was holding in his hand. Xiaoyu called Shin Yuan a bitch. The blonde man did something to the lizard, preventing the fight between the two sturdy men. Adelo realized that Xiaoyu wasn't just angry, he was furious. The armored dragon along with the blonde man was getting a bit scary. The guy kept holding the card in his hand. Adelo after thinking for a bit came to the conclusion that if a man fights a man, then first of all everyone should be men. He agreed with her conclusion. After thinking a bit about what he heard, Shin Yuan asked if the goddess was hinting that he was not a man. She was not talking about the blonde man at all. She was talking about the armored dragon. She asked if Shin Yuan couldn't see that it wasn't a dragon at all but a dragoness. He replied that it wasn't easy to understand. Adelo added that apparently the draconess fell in love with the guy. For his sake she was even able to evolve. The goddess was afraid that after a while the draconess might have turned into a human. Shin Yuan couldn't believe what he heard. He turned to Adelo. He was agreeable still on the word like, but what kind of love could there be between them? After all they weren't even of the same race. Xiaoyu heard what Shin Yuan was talking about. He decided to compliment the guy's reasoning. It didn't matter what race, it was the feelings between both parties that mattered. Xiaoyu noticed that the blonde man not only interfered with his battle but also ignored him, apparently, until the man would break a couple bones. The young guy would not be serious. Abruptly the man who was encompassed by the flames started to run. Every step was a spurt. He was rushing towards the red dragon. Watching Xiaoyu approaching Shin Yuan and the dragon, they realized that the ferocious tiger was coming down from the mountain. Shin Yuan wondered what he could do. Xiaoyu's hand moved closer to his opponent's. Abruptly, everyone heard a loud sound. This sound was akin to a clap of thunder. the man continued to overpower the young lad, coming closer and closer to him. The flames still continued to blind everyone around him. Xiaoyu struck the blonde boy even harder and louder than the previous one had been. Abruptly the man screamed. Shin Yuan and the red dragon watched Xiaoyu. The man continued to scream. Something was happening to him. Different beams of light sprinkled all over the room. Lightning boomed in the dungeon. Shin Yuan, Atalo and the red dragon watched from the side. The goddess explained that the lightning magic was of the highest level. Atalo wondered where so many spirit masters came from. Xiao was most likely a contracted spirit master as well. Xiao, who had a strange silhouette behind her, said, "Xiaoyu, stop rampaging." The man who was lying on the ground tried to say something. The words separately came to the ears of those who were standing there. Xiaoyu was saying that she herself, what she was doing was such power. He was no lodger. Xiao slapped herself on the face. She didn't know what she should do with Xiaoyu. After all, it was the same every time. Xiao turned to the man. They had agreed earlier that they would just check on these guys, but what did he do instead? Xiaoyu replied that there was no need to throw lightning bolts at him. Xiao, after thinking for a bit, said that one more hit from him and there would be no more blood from that boy. Xiao realized that their conversation was also being listened to by those present around them. Shin Yuan asked what it meant to check, and in general, what right did they have to arrest them? As long as the blonde would insist that he entered the labyrinth by accident, they had no right to detain him. Shin Yuan kept talking. There were already many outlaw hunter groups outside, and they didn't care about that at all. It was him they wanted, and even if he told them what he wanted, it shouldn't concern them anyway. Xiao, after listening carefully to everything Shin Yuan said, understood everything. Apparently the guy didn't quite understand what they were doing in the hunters' organization. The blonde decided to voice his assumptions. They monopolized the labyrinth and reaped the benefits from it. What was there that was unclear? Listening to all of Shin Yuan's accusations, Xiao exclaimed that they had a unified control. They appeared because they were needed simultaneously in all the affairs of that labyrinth, to ensure the safety of the researchers, hunters, testers, to give evaluation, to divide into classes, to give a suitable task for humans, to reduce the danger of entering the labyrinth to the maximum. These were all their activities. Xiao continued. In the ruins there were many different sources of resources unknown to them and the strongest monsters. In front of the girl's eyes all the creatures she had seen before were popping up. Besides resources, inside were also the most valuable relics that were long ahead of their time, the so-called artifacts. The artifacts gave unimaginable power. If they didn't keep an eye on them, what would happen if the artifacts fell into the hands of bad people? Xiao continued to look carefully at those in front of her. Not only were they supposed to keep them safe, but they were also supposed to investigate incidents that could be related to the artifacts, to determine if the suspect was dangerous, if they could fully utilize their powers. Xiao turned to Shin Yuan and asked if he had received anything from the unnamed goddess. Shin Yuan along with the armored dragon stood and listened carefully to Xiao. He heard the girl kept asking about the lizard that the young guy was controlling, and it was proof that he had received something from the nameless goddess. Putting two fingers up, Xiao said that she was sorry but she could only give him two choices. Xiao continued. The first choice was a strict punishment for not admitting guilt. They would fulfill it. The second choice, they would come back for a cup of tea and a chat. While after the young guy confesses, they hope he will use his artifact for good and join them. So Xiao also suggested that they could have another round with that big uncle and the young guy, and then again the blonde guy would think. After listening carefully, Shin Yuan, looking at Xiao and Xiaoyu, realized that it was better not to do such a thing. Suddenly, a voice behind the guy said that if it were him, he wouldn't believe these guys at all. In front of them all, a girl who looked like a fox was standing on top of the cliff. Shin Yuan quickly raised his head up. He didn't understand who had come again. After all, this was a secret dungeon. Xiao and Xiaoyu carefully looked up, standing all together and watching who appeared in front of them. They didn't realize who it could be. The girl had red hair, red ears and red paws. She carefully looked at everyone in front of her, turning to Shin Yuan and holding out her hand to him. She said that she was his real partner. The girl that looked like a fox continued her words. They were to oppose the plundering of the dungeon artifacts. Lowering her hand that looked like a paw, she added that they had to do it for love and for freedom. Turning to everyone who stood there, she introduced herself as the foxy, sweet and beautiful Xiao Hong, who was entering the stage with brilliance. Under her leadership, she was going to help the blonde man free himself from the clutches of the nefarious hunter organization. Continuing to watch the vixen, everyone remained silent as they pondered over what they had heard. Shin Yuan turned to Atalo. He asked if the fox-eared maiden could be real. Atalo looked at the young guy carefully and tried to ask if he was by that. Xiao, seeing a fox, thought she had heard that somewhere before. The big guy next to him replied that he liked cats better, but he liked foxes too. The girl shouted that no one cared about his hobbies, calling the red-haired man a chump. The vixen turned to the hunters and said she was taking the blonde man with her, hoping they were okay with that. The big man shouted that it would only happen over his dead body. The vixen, hearing what the big guy said, agreed with him to make it happen the way he wanted it to. Abruptly, the vixen changed her position, quickly moving down towards those in front of her. The big man warned Mrs. Xiao to be careful. Xia Yu wished to deal with the fox. Facing each other, the man addressed the fox, calling it brave. He wanted to see what it was capable of. The vixen loudly shouted the word illusion. Xia Yu didn't expect this. He looked surprised, not realizing what was about to happen. Bright flames enveloped everything around. Through the flames, the sly laughter of the foxes could be heard. In front of the people who were in the dungeon, there were many foxes. The main fox turned to everyone. She asked to see a beautiful performance performed by Xiaohong. This performance had the name, The Riot of Cunning Foxes. Xia Yu didn't understand what kind of illusions they were. It was impossible to distinguish from a real fox. Xia Yu and Xiao were surrounded by foxes. There were more than 10 of them. They were all preparing to attack. The nude leaf was running towards Shin Yuan and the armored dragon. The blonde and the dragon saw the fox approaching them. The armored dragon was about to attack the one that was approaching them. Shin Yuan tried to stop the dragon. The dragon froze, awaiting further decisiveness from its opponent. The fox laughed at the dragon's anger. With incredible speed and agility, the fox was able to evade the dragon without receiving a single hit. She only laughed. Shin Yuan didn't understand what it was about the fox's movements. How could it get around the armored dragon so quickly? The fox stepped even closer to the young lad. She had come to get the blonde boy, calling him brother. He didn't know what she was talking about. Putting her paw in front of the guy's face, she quickly slammed it down. The blonde man was surprised that it was a real, huge paw. Xiao and Xiaoyu, who were in the surroundings, realized that things were bad, for the fox had already gotten to the guy. The vixen addressed the blonde guy with words to relax. The rest she asked to be given to her. Xiaoyu, throwing flames around, roared that he wouldn't let them escape. The fox turned to the armored dragon. She said that it would go along with them. Xiaoyu only came closer and closer, shouting for the vixen to bring the blonde man back, but red smoke enveloped everything around them. Shin Yuan and the dragon waited to see what would happen next. Abruptly, a loud sound and a bright light blinded everyone. Xiaoyu, getting even angrier, tried to stop those who were disappearing. The flames were very strong. Abruptly, the bright beams began to disappear. The flames began to go out. The red smoke began to dissipate. Xiao and Xiaoyu saw that the fox along with the guy and the dragon had disappeared. The big guy couldn't understand where they could have gone. Xiao, remembering the image, tried to figure out where this red fox was familiar to her. Shin Yuan and the vixen found themselves outside. They were walking in a tunnel, slowly covering the distance. Shin Yuan was glad that he finally got out. He was definitely a criminal now. The vixen tried to calm him down. Now he had her. The blonde man looked at the fox. He had a question. He tried to ask. Looking at the fox, he asked who she was. After all, she was. Shin Yuan kept asking. He was curious about what the girl was doing in that dungeon. Were the paws and ears real? How did she know about the fate cards? Did she have a boyfriend? The fox tried to stop him. There were too many questions at once. Atalo, who was still with them as well, tried to address them and wanted to ask one question. Atalo asked the vixen if she could see her. So, the girl stopped talking for a bit. After thinking a little, the girl added, "Therefore, which spirit sent the vixen?" The fox replied that it was a fox that came from another world. Shin Yuan did not believe what he heard. He did not understand what was going on. The hunter's office was a multi-story office. 2 people with automatic rifles stood at the entrance of the office. Walking slowly inside, a loud voice shouted to everyone inside to keep still. Walking further inside, the guy heard him being greeted, calling him Mr. Chun. Mr. Chun turned to one of the guys who was standing with a gun. The young gentleman asked how much time was left until the end of the workday. Everyone stood and looked at him, for he had just arrived and the lunch break had just ended. The boys went on to say that Mrs. Xiao had ordered that by all means, do not let Mr. Chun go. It had been a week since he had come. The gentleman, when he heard what he was told, was not happy at all. He was going to take over the room, warning that if they were looking for him, let them say he was on an operational mission. He ordered that everyone be dismissed. He made his way to the room, getting ready to go to bed, slowly covering his eyes. Abruptly he heard his name being called. Opening his eyes, he saw Mrs. Chiu and Sir Xiaoyu sitting in front of him. They made it clear that this room was already occupied. Mrs. Chiu remarked that work is work and leisure is leisure. Mr. Chun tried to leave so as not to disturb them. He tried to pretend that he had another unfinished business. Xiaoyu tried to stop the guy. After all, it had been so long since they had seen each other and he was about to leave. Xiaoyu turned to the guy and reminded him that Chun loved operational missions. They just needed a hard-working operative. As a young guy, Chun tried to leave, saying that he had a ton of reports to turn in those couple of days. Mrs. Xiu called out to Mr. Chun and Sir Xiaoyu. She added that they had apparently forgotten who was filing all the reports for them, calling them idiots. They turned in her direction. Mr. Chun shouted that there was no difference. Being an operative meant working overtime, and he was not allowed to work more than he needed to. He didn't understand why they couldn't just take his salary and give him a salary for lying around and getting high. Mrs. Xiu didn't change at all. Xiu continued talking. Abruptly she said that a new owner of the artifact had shown up. Chun was surprised at what he heard. Mr. Chun asked if that was why she wanted him to go fight to the death again with a terrifyingly strong opponent. Xiu replied that until the owner awakened. Abruptly, the sound of the message caught the attention of everyone in the room. Xiu sent the guy the data. And by the way, it was about time for the guy to change the retarded notification sound to a normal one. The sound of the notification were the words about working for collective farmers. You can't live your life at work. Opening the message, the guy saw the information. The object Shin Yuan, powerless, recently recruited by the Hagome organization, entered the ruins of the unnamed goddess. It was safe to say that the ruins were attacked. Being the only survivor, he will receive an artifact from the unnamed goddess. Xiu continued. Firstly, she and Xiaoyu had already encountered the guy. His abilities were specific. Secondly, as long as he can't use the abilities to the fullest, the girl asked to bring the guy to them, so that in the future no one could trick him and turn him against them. Turning to the guy over whom the monster that resembled a black angel hovered, the girl reminded him that they were contractors after all, and it would be easier for them to find common ground. Now the strongest was Chun. Abruptly a fox paw appeared in front of her eyes. She raised a finger up, explaining to Shin Yuan that they were only looking for him because he didn't have a license. Turning to the guy, she said she would help him get one. Shin Yuan agreed, but after all he was the reason he didn't have a license. The fox tried to calm him down. She just told him to rely on her. The fox continued. Once they show how strong they are, he would be able to get his license right away. Shin Yuan realized that they were talking about a team competition. Continuing to walk forward, Shin Yuan continued to say that even if that was the case, as far as he knew, teams of 3 to 5 people would compete in 3 rounds, up to 2 wins. He wondered if that was correct. Shin Yuan went on to say that there were only 2 of them. As he passed by people further and further away, he noticed that there were especially many people at that moment. Shin Yuan and Attilo continued to look at the people that surrounded them. The fox said that she would go sign them up for the competition, asking to be waited on for a bit. Attilo reminded Shin Yuan that he didn't have a fox race in his world. Wasn't it dangerous for a fox to walk around looking like that walking the streets? Shin Yuan replied that although he didn't understand what fox race she was talking about and what other world was there, but a look like Xiao Han's was what they called maze syndrome. He went on to say that most of the guys who worked in the labyrinth for quite a long time or the hunters might grow something strange on their body from time to time. Maybe it was all related to the increase of their skills after defeating the monster. It had no effect on their daily life, so people gradually got used to it and accepted these oddities. Attilo, imagining the story in her head, understood everything she was told. After defeating the monster, people absorbed the rest of their souls. She paused a bit. Attilo said that usually people who had an unstable psyche or a high probability of compatibility with the monster's soul would undergo physical changes. Shin Yuan didn't understand what the girl was talking about. She was speaking in a language incomprehensible to him. Recalling the fox, Attilo said that this girl's appearance was her original appearance, and the world where Shin Yuan was she did not belong. Shin Yuan noticed that Xiao Hong was also bound by a spirit contract, but why they didn't see her spirit? Atalo realized that it only came to him now. Shin Yuan only knew that the fox wanted to return to her world and that was it. Atalo said that because of the unstable power of the labyrinth she was transported to the world they were in. She lost contact with her spirit. The labyrinth was the space between worlds. Shin Yuan said he didn't care about the labyrinth. Atalo questioned if he really didn't care. Fox started calling Shin Yuan over to her. She said they had gotten permission to compete. Atalo suspected something. Something caught her attention. Shin Yuan, looking at his partner, thought that this might have been the brightest moment of his life. The fox was trying to shout to Shin Yuan, talking about music for his ears. Atalo was looking at this, not understanding the blonde at all. Shin Yuan heard the fox calling out to him, saying that everything was ready. She ran towards him, showing her permission to participate in the competition. As she came closer, the fox said that now all they had to do was to defeat everyone and it was a matter of a hat. Shin Yuan looked at the permit and asked if 2 people could participate in the contest. The fox replied that they could not, but noted that there were 3 of them. Shin Yuan, who had Atalo over his shoulder, asked again if there were definitely 3, but even so, he hesitated a bit to continue. The fox showed the resolution where the list of participants was. The guy saw that Xiao Hong's real name was Hong Hong. The fox remembered that this was how her name was officially written down in this world. The third was Danley. Looking at the photo, the guy had a question. Who was the uncle and why was his portrait different from theirs? The fox remarked that it was an ant. It could be seen from the hairstyle. Shin Yuan said that at a glance it might have been a cringe, but if you looked closely, you could feel a strong aura. The fox laughed and admitted that the pass was actually fake. Shin Yuan asked again if the pass was fake, wondering who she had forged it for. The fox replied that of course it was done for them. Shin Yuan tried to explain that an ordinary person couldn't even see a tella, so how would she fight them? The fox looked at the guy carefully and asked if he had forgotten. For them, this including that big armored Miss Lizard. Shin Yuan remembered about the armored dragon. Shin Yuan said the armored dragon is a monster. He asked if he would be allowed to participate. The fox asked, did she look like an ordinary human? Everyone has long been used to this. Showing her paws, Shin Yuan pointed out that no matter how you look at it, but the fox was more like a human. The fox replied that in their world, they were the only species that had any intelligence. Surprisingly, only humans were intelligent. Shin Yuan replied that he would like to see what it was like in her world. Atalo said that the way she thought of it, the fox's idea wasn't too bad. Atalo thought that if you tinker with the perception of the world, modify it a bit, it wasn't that hard to turn into a human. The guy queried about the body transformation. After thinking a bit, Atalo realized that it was possible to use cards. The fox asked why she could use cards. Atalo replied that she was a goddess after all. The fox was surprised. She didn't expect to see fate cards in front of her. Shin Yuan heard someone behind him call out to him in surprise. A guy and a girl came closer to them. They called the blonde man trash, asking if he was still trying to become a hunter. The girl remarked that they hadn't seen each other in a long time. Shin Yuan recognized the guy that stood in front of him. It was Wang Jun. Shin Yuan didn't understand what had become of his teeth and ears. As it turned out, these were common post-labyrinth symptoms. The guy didn't understand why Shin Yuan was surprised. The guy was a warrior, AB+ level hunter. After the labyrinth he had gotten troll symptoms. The girl that was with the guy was glad that Shin Yuan was alive. She heard that the guy went to the ruins with those people. She thought the blonde guy was also in trouble. The girl's name was Lu Xiao. She was a warlock, a level B+ hunter. Wang asked the blonde guy, was it really so bad to work as a garbage man? He asked if Shin Yuan could stay out of the way. The guy continued. He recalled how Shin Yuan's father died. He said that the blonde man shouldn't have come there and embarrass himself. Shin Yuan reprimanded that Wang Jun had said enough already. Wang Jun turned to the vixen and said that being with the guy on the team was a complete futility, because Shin Yuan was nothing. Lu Xiao tried to stop her partner. The vixen just laughed, thanking the guy for the advice. Wang Jun poked his finger at the fox. She decided to notice this gesture of his, trying to explain that it was not tactful to poke people with a finger like that. Wang Jun shouted, interjecting about what she said poking. She shouted again that it was very uncultured. Abruptly, the vixen picked up the guy and lifted him up, twisting him above her head. She toppled him to the ground. Wang Jun fell to the floor. He felt a wild pain in his whole body as he fell to the floor from the fox's blow. the fox decided to greet the guy. She introduced herself, saying that if she was good-natured, even she wouldn't tolerate her team member being insulted. Wang Jun, listening to what the vixen was telling him, got even angrier, calling Xiaohong a bitch, rising to his feet trying to attack the fox. The guy yelled out to not even think if she was abroad he wouldn't hit her, he would skin her. Lu Xiao tried to stop the guy while the fox laughed and waited for the promised attack. Shin Yuan thanked the vixen for standing up for him, but he felt like she didn't quite understand what was going on. Shin Yuan continued. The ugly and profane Wang Jun along with Lu Xiao had been his close friends since childhood. Yes, he said bad things. Yes, he was stupid. But it was all because he was worried that the guy might die in the ruins. Wang Jun said that after that day, Shin Yuan was no longer a friend to him. The blonde guy didn't have to die in the cave. He could finish him off right there. Lu Xiao tried to stop Wang Jun to shut up. Shin Yuan turned to his dumb friend. He was going to be frank with him. Since their last meeting he had changed a lot. Wang Jun didn't believe it. He didn't think that trash like Shin Yuan could progress. He asked if the guy wanted to say that the fox would protect him. Shin Yuan confidently replied that he could only say one thing. The current one was much stronger than his dumb friend. Wang Jun told the guy to say whatever he wanted. Shin Yuan tried to call out his friend. Turning around, Wang Jun said that he and the blonde guy were in the same cage. If the guy could hold out and face him, he would recognize him. Shin Yuan smiled at what he heard. He wasn't going to face his friend. He could just destroy him. After hearing this, Wang Jun said that if that was really the case, then he would talk to his leader to invite the blonde man into their squad. Even though he wanted to kill him, Shin Yuan tried to say that he didn't need to do that. After all, he had Xiaohong. Shin Yuan heard him being called out in a quiet voice. Adelo asked the blonde man if he would really fight him. Shin Yuan thought about the fact that with the fate cards he could supposedly win, especially since the armored dragon was terrifyingly strong. Adelo reminded that the dragon was also in the competition. She asked if the blonde had forgotten about it, but Shin Yuan didn't remember it at all. The competition was starting. Everyone was sitting in anticipation. A voice decided to thank everyone who came to those amazing competitions among hunters. Despite being busy, there was a commentator booth with people in touch. The commentators of those competitions were Huang Xian and the beautiful Zhou Wei. The commentators continued that there were 16 teams participating in this competition. Not only would the winners of the competition be able to get a huge cash prize, but they would also have the opportunity to get many more tasks in the future. The hostess turned to teacher Huang, as she could see that not a few new participants had come. Huang replied that it was back. In those competitions the hopeful youths had every chance to get a hunter's license, and the first contestants were already appearing in the arena. A B-level hunter, Wang Jun, and an A-level hunter, Sha Lao. The opponents stood opposite each other, preparing for each other's next moves. The hosts continued. The format of the competition was 3 rounds to 2 victories. At that moment the decisive round could happen. Wang Jun was in danger. Even though he was very capable and had high hopes, fighting an opponent a level above him was not an easy task. Xiao was too strong. The opponents started their battle, throwing beams of light and striking each other. Wang Jun was having a hard time. Xiao Lao was on the attack. Shin Yuan watched their contest closely. He realized that his friend in the past had become much stronger. Shin Yuan continued to observe further what was happening, but as it was, the blonde man remained silent for a while, pondering further on what he had seen. Behind Shin Yuan was the boss, his assistant and the god of greed. Shin Yuan was trying to find out how on earth they had managed to team up. The boss smilingly remarked that it was a small world, for they had met again. The blonde man wondered what they had forgotten in the competition lounge. The god of greed explained that they met outside the maze. Unlike the guy, their deals were successful, and they just like the god of greed hated the blonde man. Shin Yuan smiled. He tried to find out if their deal was not successful. Abruptly Shin Yuan realized what he had just been told. He had heard from the god about the deal he had made. Turning to the boss, Shin Yuan couldn't believe that the bespectacled man had made a deal with the spirit of greed. The boss laughed upon hearing the question. The boss asked if the blonde man thought that after all that happened, he could just forgive the guy like that. Shin Yuan pointed out that just when the blonde man was thinking about how he would take revenge on the boss, this self-proclaimed spirit of greed appeared right in front of him. Shin Yuan, pondering over what he heard, wondered if the boss had also signed a contract with the spirit. The boss admitted that now he had nothing at all. Sadness appeared on his face, thinking about what kind of contract he had signed. The god of greed told him that the boss had made a wish. If the god was indeed a spirit of greed, it was to help find Shin Yuan and teach him a good lesson. The god of greed fulfilled their wishes, and in exchange, they became his servants. The boss confessed that he must have been cursed because he could not resist the god's orders. Shin Yuan felt sorry for the man with glasses who stood in front of him. Shin Yuan said that basically everyone behind him could already be silent. The boss started crying because he didn't understand why he was the unluckiest. The god of greed turned to Shin Yuan, talking about having a couple of things stashed away. Wasn't this guy interested? The blonde man mentally begged Xiao Hong to save him. The battle between the opponents continued. Rays of light illuminated all around, small balls flying in all directions. A young guy, striking blow after blow to his opponent, defeated his enemy. The guy was only 18 years old. His hunting experience was only 2 years. Today's youth did not spare anyone. The commentators asked for applause for Wang Jun and his Feihu organization. They were going to the next round. Wang Jun raised his hand up, for he was the winner of this round. The girl presenter turned to teacher Huang again. She thought he was rooting for Sha Lao. The teacher laughed, saying that the girl didn't understand anything. It was called reverse psychology, but that wasn't what was important. What was important were the next two teams. The announcer asked Shin Yuan's team and Hao Yun's team to prepare for the competition. Shin Yuan in the company of the boss's assistant and the god of greed, listened carefully to what the commentators were announcing. Shin Yuan heard that it was their turn. He didn't understand where Xiao Hong and Atalo had gone. He waited. The fox appeared behind the guy. She apologized for them making him wait so long. He turned around, looking at the fox. He was happy to see the fox. It was their turn to go out. Behind the fox was someone else walking behind the fox. The blonde man turned to Xiao Hong, trying to find out who was with the fox. Shin Yuan, along with the god of greed, the boss and his assistant, scrutinized the one who appeared right in front of their eyes. After looking a little more closely ahead, they realized that right in front of them was an armored dragon. Fox, walking along with the armored dragon, said that it took a long time to equip the dragonkin. Now the armored dragon looked like it had escaped from a Hollywood blockbuster. Atalo turned to the blonde man, said that by changing the records of fate, she made the whole world know about the existence of creatures like the armored dragon. No magic could help to see this change. Shin Yuan realized that the girl was talking in an incomprehensible language again. The presenters invited the contestants to enter the arena. The god of greed turned around to Shin Yuan and waved at him, saying that they would see each other again in the arena. Shin Yuan was surprised at such a statement. Shin Yuan wondered if their opponents were not Hao Yun's team, which was then announced by the presenters. The god of greed laughed loudly. He asked the guy, didn't he know something? Pointing his hand at his team, he said that they were their opponents, Hao Yun's team. Shin Yuan tensed up more when he realized that their first opponent in the competition was a spirit. The announcers announced that both teams had entered the arena. The girl asked who the teacher would cheer for this time. The teacher picked up on the fact that both teams were apparently newcomers. Standing opposite each other, the two teams looked into each other's eyes. The announcers continued. There were ordinary people on both teams. It seemed to the commentator that this particular battle could be intriguing. To begin with, the teacher pointed out that apparently the team name Shin Yuan was the name of the team leader. Everyone was amazed at how confident they had to be. In addition to the Red Fox, the team also had Dan Lee, who had escaped from a Hollywood blockbuster. This team had some very charismatic characters. The crowd was screaming their love for Xiao Hong. In the other team, however, were not just collective farmers. There was Kokai Iron Hand Bob, who came from a financial organization, a lawyer, a well-meaning scoundrel, Ja Chong. The crowd shouted that they were not welcome and to get out of the arena quickly. And the leader of the team was a little girl that stood in front of them. The commentators hoped that she would be able to prove herself. The god of greed in the little girl's body approached the blonde man with a betting proposal, a bet on the young lad's cards. Shin Yuan heard the offer of the god of greed, but he looked sharply into the eyes of his opponent and said that he refused such a bet. While the two teams were preparing for the battle, the host decided to announce the rules of the competition once again. This time, in addition to knockdown and surrendering the opponent, the contest also included a points victory. The commentator continued. The system would calculate the damage done and give out the corresponding points. The first to score 10 points would win automatically. The team that won 2 rounds would advance to the next round. So there the deciding factor for victory was intelligence rather than strength. The commentator asked the contestants to think hard about their battle plan. The red vixen pointed out that with these rules, the competition had turned into a showdown. Shin Yuan realized that they needed to take out Bob and Ja Chong and they could already win. Attilo pointed out that it was unfortunate for her but their chances of winning were too slim. The blonde man was surprised at such a statement. Attilo explained that it was too bad that the toad had also entered the competition, even considering that the god of greed's abilities were limited. He was also a spirit after all. Shin Yuan listened to the goddess' suggestion. Their best option was for the blonde guy to come out against the toad and the fox and dragons against the two that were together with the god of greed. But if the toad met the fox and dragon, would the guy be able to defeat his two opponents? The blonde guy agreed to this. Shin Yuan started to think about the plan. At that moment, most of the magic was concentrated in the armored dragon. The blonde heard the vixen suggest that she should go first into battle. The guy was surprised. Attilo was surprised. She tried to find out if the vixen was sure of her decision. Her opponent could be a spirit of greed. The vixen raised her paw upwards and replied that there was no time to think. Whoever was there didn't make a difference. The vixen noted that in their tales the spirit of greed loved to work from under the shadows and manipulate others to get what they wanted. So unless there was a need, the spirit of greed would not come out in person. Foxy swept up. Since the victory was on points, who won and who lost wasn't certain yet. Foxy stepped forward to fight her opponent. The commentator announced that Gong Hong from Shin Yuan's team would be the first to come out. Foxy waved to everyone. She could hear how she was wished good luck, how she was loved and how popular she was. The vixen was pleased with such attention. She smiled, feeling so supported. The commentator announced the contestant from the second team. Suddenly purple smoke appeared in the arena. Shin Yuan swept up. Luck was not on their side. The goddess was listening attentively and watching to see what would happen next. The commentator continued. A member of Hao Yun's team, Tang Tang, was entering the arena and purple smoke around her. This is an ability. The god of greed asked the vixen if she would disappoint him. The vixen replied that the girl did not guess. The god of greed said that the vixen thought he would hide and come out last. It was impossible to outsmart the sly man. The god immediately advised the little vixen to give up. The little fox heard this and laughed loudly. Maybe the spirit of greed was right, but people might think they were losing on purpose. Stopping to laugh, the vixen replied that she wasn't such a wuss. The commentator remarked that the member of the first team was going to attack first. The vixen jumped high. The commentator remarked what a jump it was. It was that gained strength after absorbing the spirit of the maze beasts. The fox hanging in the air shouted a single word. Illusions. Illusions of foxes like her formed around her. The commentator noticed the first team's participants split up. A large number of illusions appeared in the arena. He wondered what this ability was. More and more purple smoke was emitted around the opposing girl. Apparently each of the participants had special abilities. The god of greed, watching the vixen's actions, laughed. This was all very funny to him. Tang Tang continued to laugh. The host noticed that the smoke was beginning to gather, as the girl wanted to make some kind of technique. And at this time, the illusions of the first team members started their attack. Each illusion's attack was unique. It wasn't just a cloning trick. The violet smoke of the second team member attacked back with its own smoke. The smoke as if alive, destroying all the illusions coming close to the girl. It was not clear at all if there was a real fox among them. The members of the second team didn't understand what the pranks were. Was the self-proclaimed spirit really a spirit? Seeing that Xiao Hong was in danger, the goddess and armored dragon that stood beside him watched as the vixen fought along with the spirit of greed. Attilo noticed that the vixen was having a hard time at all. They all noticed that the spirit of greed had the ability to suck out magic power. Meanwhile, the god of greed in the girl's body directed his hands to strike the vixen again. The god of greed only needed to spread smoke throughout the arena. This smoke could easily dispel the illusions and catch the fox. Watching this, the first team realized that it was a cringe at all. They had to recall Xiao Hong. Attilo gathered her thoughts and decided to say something to her team members. She noticed that from the beginning of the battle, she hadn't sensed the fox's aura at all. Meanwhile, while the first team was discussing the action of their member, the god of greed was looking for the little fox. He was sure that her illusions would end soon. He already had hopes of how he would catch her. The god of greed, in the girl's body, swept up. Even he wouldn't want to embarrass himself in front of such a crowd. Abruptly a fox appeared behind the god. She asked if the girl was looking for her. The girl didn't understand how this was possible. How could the fox be in the center of her purple smoke? The vixen became face to face with her opponent and raised her paw upwards, trying to strike her enemy. The god of greed did not understand at all how this was even possible. The commentator called out the fox's action. The member of the first team jumped out of the purple smoke and threw the first punch. the vixen continued to deliver blow after blow to her enemy, commenting that she had nothing personal against the spirit of greed, but she couldn't stop striking. The commentator added that the first team member was completely dominant. It was unclear if her opponent had a chance to turn it around. Fox turned to the presenters and said that she should have gotten more points for such a show. The participant of the first team not only hit the opponent's head with each blow, but also put all her strength into each blow. The fox's blow gave off a bright orange flame, illuminating everything around. The announcers watching the battle were afraid that nothing would happen to the second team member. The commentator reminded that according to the rules of the competition it was not allowed to kill the opponent. Adelo noted that the vixen was able to bypass the fog of the spirit of greed and her skills were not bad at all. The red dragon, the blonde and the goddess watched the battle realizing that they had already won. Adelo said it was too early to rejoice, for this toad had a trump card up her sleeve. The members of the second team watched as the girl from their team was destroyed. The boss looking on told the vixen to shove the little girl and they were finally free. The big guy reminded the boss that they were one team. The commentators turned to the vixen. Her next actions could lead to the death of her opponent, so they asked her to stop fighting. The judge was about to start the report. The vixen pointed out that it was not easy to kill a body with a spirit in it. Meanwhile, the spirit of greed, lying on the ground, laughed loudly. Fox noticed that her opponent was not unconscious at all. She stood up abruptly and addressed the spirit of greed, saying that she shouldn't have, because of the competition. She was silent for a while, looking at the pink smoke that was behind the spirit. She finished that she shouldn't have exposed her true appearance. The girl who had the spirit in her body praised the little vixen, saying that it wasn't bad at all. The presenters commented on the situation. After the beating, the second team member stood up as if nothing had happened and summoned a huge smoke monster. The commentators didn't understand what the technique was, but they noticed how the strength of the second team member increased many times over. The second team members didn't realize who the girl who was with them was. Adelo said that if the stupid toad continued to use so much power, the girl's body that contained the spirit of greed might not be able to take it. The blonde swept the aura. It was exactly the same in the ruins. Foxy picked up on the fact that there was a problem. Her opponent was not at all squeamish about wasting the life of a contracted body for the sake of victory. Fox realized that in essence, the blonde man, her, and the girl who fought with her were all contractors, but the difference was that the guy had a contract with the spirit woman. With the help of the god's grace he was increasing his abilities, while the girl was under the full control of the spirit, wasting life force even on everyday tasks. The foxy woman noticed that there might be a spirit fighting with her, but the sucker used by the spirit to fight, it was an ordinary person. Xiao Hong was surprised that her punches couldn't knock out the girl who had a spirit in her body. The punch she clearly held well. Fox pushed all these thoughts aside. It was all unimportant. In any case, victory was on points. If she didn't grab it, it could be considered that victory was in the first team's pocket. The commentators noticed the first team member splitting up again, but the opponent wasn't backing down at all either. The huge purple smoke became much more aggressive. Would the smoke be able to get the fox's real body this time? The blonde man thought the illusion was a good plan, but the smoke covered too much space. Sooner or later the spirit would get the fox. The goddess said it looked like an illusion, but it wasn't the illusions the young lad thought it was. Attilo continued, a real body can be all illusions, and maybe not just one of them. Each illusion is a ghost of what could happen to the fox over many timelines. She could choose which illusion, her real body. If she is in a bad situation, she immediately overrides such an outcome. If a good one, she immediately chooses it. After listening to what the goddess said, the blonde asked if the vixen could switch from one illusion to another. Attilo replied that it essentially did. Thus she could now understand which spirit the vixen had signed a contract with. The two opponents were still in a fierce battle. As soon as the mist destroyed a couple illusions, new ones would take their place. In such turmoil it was very hard for the judges to keep score. Fox decided to attack her opponent from the back. She wanted to get this over with as soon as possible. Fox felt that something was wrong. She had a feeling that she felt a punch. The commentators picked up that the second team member had also vaporized and also used an illusion at that moment. It was already some kind of ninja competition. The vixen couldn't believe what had happened. The vixen got upset. It was too bad she couldn't feel the presence of her opponent. Suddenly someone called out to her from behind, with the words, "Are you looking for me?" The vixen turned around sharply. She saw another of herself in front of her. the god of greed, who had taken on the guise of a fox now, attempted to attack his opponent, asking permission to score him points. The vixen was very attracted to the sight of her opponent, and tried to deflect the blow that the spirit of greed was giving her. The spirit looked forward at his opponent and said that she had very interesting abilities, adding that he would use them too. The commentators didn't understand what had just happened in front of them. The first team member was attacked by her own illusion. They didn't understand where the second team member had gone. Looking closely at the illusion, they realized that there was something wrong with that illusion. The color of the fox's skin was dark. The god of greed commented that everything was clear. The so-called illusions were reflections of the future. The fox realized the appearance of the spirit of greed. This was not just a reincarnation. The spirit replied that appropriation was one of its abilities. The god continued that the vixen's ability was to choose one of the illusions of the future with the best outcome. It was worth its little bit of hustle. So what would it do if a future appeared in which it took over her body? If the fox continued to use her abilities, the outcome of the spirit of greed appropriating the fox's body would only get stronger. In the end, the fox could become his. Xiao Hong thought it all sounded like a zombie virus. The spirit was going to continue the battle. He wanted to be allowed to see even more possible outcomes that could happen. The announcers asked to wait. They were puzzled. Was the Dark Woods and was the participant of the second team? They didn't understand what that technique was. The commentator had picked up on it. Both opponents were saying something to each other and not fighting. Perhaps they were plotting something. The commentators watched carefully as the events unfolded. The member of the first team raised her arm high. They thought that it was a special stance that she wanted to use for some kind of technique. During the battle, the contestant was able to get 9 points, maybe due to the transformation that the second team's contestant had made. She was able to recover a little, but if she missed one hit, the winner of this round would be Shin Yuan's team. The blonde shouted for the vixen to move forward. They were 1 point away from victory. The goddess swept up that it wasn't that easy. The spirit of greed appealed to the vixen. He urged her to move forward. She was only 1 point away from winning. The god of greed thought that when the vixen greedily wanted to finish him off, he could take her body. The vixen held her hand up and apologized to everyone, voicing her decision to surrender. Spirit hadn't expected at all the turn of such an event. He was dumbfounded by what he heard. The presenters commented that the member of the first team surrendered unexpectedly. The crowd did not understand what influenced the fox's decision. The victory was won by the member of the second team. The blonde didn't understand why the vixen did that. She had victory in her pocket. The goddess commented that it was very clever. It didn't matter if she won or lost. If her power was taken away, the game wasn't worth it. The vixen, smiling, repeated that she had lost. Turning to her opponent, she thanked her for the 9 points she had. She was very happy to beat the second team member. The vixen moved closer to her team. She apologized for losing, but they were only interested in whether she was okay. The goddess swept her eyes over to the fox. The fox had prevented that toad from getting its way. Hearing this, Xiao Hong raised her eyes to Atalo and smiled. The goddess realized which spirit the fox had contracted with. Turning to the fox, she asked if the fate goddess was so contracted. The blonde man. Hearing this, the blonde man suddenly exclaimed. The blonde interjected. Was the fox also connected to the goddess of fate? Just like him, he wondered why the girl hadn't told him this before. The goddess that was in front of his eyes replied that she too only realized it at that moment. The vixen asked if they were serious when they said it. The blonde looked at her enthusiastically. He realized that she didn't know it herself. The blonde, confused in his thoughts, asked everyone to stop. The vixen decided to ask if she was Ms. Atalo's contracted teammate. Atalo called her team members completely stupid. She added that there were 3 goddesses of fate. The spirit associated with the fox was one of her sisters. The commentators continued to run the show. They asked the next 2 contestants to enter the arena. The behavior of the first team member may have been a bit shocking, but the fight itself was amazing. Everyone was eager to see the next battle. The goddess offered to put the spirits aside. She didn't know what they were going to do. Who was going to go out? The blonde suggested that he would go out now. If he was losing, they were going to go home, leaving everything behind. Abruptly turning to his master, the team member said he would go. The blonde turned sharply to the armored dragon. The armored dragon uttered just a few words. Competition. Victory. I can do it. The blonde tried to call out to his team member. Shin Yuan didn't expect that the armored dragon could talk. The goddess asked if he was so surprised by this. The commentators announced that the participants of the next fight were entering the arena. From the second team was a participant who was in the top 10 best guards, in collecting debts and interest, having a lot of experience. His name was Heavy Bob. Opposite the participants of the second team was the mysterious martial artist Danley. After he was bitten by a lizard during a trip to the underground city, he was greatly transformed. An unremarkable lizard entered the arena. Bob's weapon was so conspicuous. It was a healthy red axe. At a glance one could tell that the axe was of unusual origin. The blonde man, watching the fight, noticed that he had met this axe somewhere before. The boss didn't understand since when his subordinate Bob knew how to use the axe. The god of greed said that it was his gift and also a surprise for the blonde man. The spirit of greed shouted for the sea warrior to kill the lizard that was in front of him. Everyone was shocked that Heavy Bob was using an axe. The presenters speculated that perhaps he had faked his profession when registering, or it was some kind of strategy he had. The boss said that if giving Bob such a high rank, wasn't it a waste of time? Professions that didn't match weapons would only be a burden. The god of greed said that Bob wasn't the same anymore. The spirit said that he had picked out some good items in the dungeon and lent them to Bob. The only payment was that Bob would be the spirit's slave for the rest of his life. The boss asked if the price was too high. The spirit said he didn't think so. After all, he had given the god the same level of fighting ability that the boss had. The man in glasses tried to ask why Bob the bastard had signed the contract just for the power. The spirit said he still didn't know the details of the contract, but the big guy was happy when he got the axe. The spirit noticed that the guys lent money most of the time and hid the high interest rates that came afterwards. The man replied that at least they showed the client the contract. They weren't crooks. Standing in front of his opponent, the armored dragon realized that this time he couldn't lose at all. The blonde man shouted for the dragon not to force himself. The dragon remembered the humiliations he was able to endure. He wanted to repay what he had. The battle began. The armored dragon dodged the axe attacks and delivered a knee strike to his opponent's face. Bob's mask was shattered to pieces. The dragon continued to attack, striking another hard blow. Danley received another point, her armor seemingly engulfed in flames. Abruptly, Bob plowed the armored dragon to the ground, holding its head firmly and pinning it down. The hosts didn't realize what was happening. Bob was smearing Danley with his bare hands on the floor. It seemed that Bob had found a gap in the attacks and counterattacked. It was magnificent. The team was horrified at what was happening to the armored dragon. That freak, Bob, was intent on killing. Bob was coming armored dragon, and raised his axe high. Could the battle really end there? Danley decided to use a skill. This skill was flame armor. Abruptly Bob began to burn. The armored dragon fled from Bob. The flames covered everything around. The big guy couldn't understand at all what Danley had done. The employees of the hunter's office were watching the bouts. They had no doubt that the fire came from the lizard in red armor, and the mistress didn't expect that the monster could become human. The big man said that the blonde Orsika was bold and daring enough to take the dragon with him to battle. He offered to catch them right now. The girl that stood next to him asked him to wait a little longer, and warned him not to even think of using the nickname Fox. Mrs. Shou added that about catching the others, that was something that should have been left to Tsubaki. She really wanted to see what kind of specimen this special lizard could turn into. Danley was blazing with flames. Bob was still devoured by the flames. The situation of the battle was continuously changing. Bob, calling the lizard stupid, threatened that he would kill it. The commentators remarked that the god had gotten out of the flames, appearing to be unharmed, but his clothes were burned. Bob's eyes turned sharply red. He remembered everything, tearing his clothes off. Everyone saw that Bob had scales on his body. He said that he would now continue the fight with this dungeon traitor. No one understood what kind of uniform Bob had. Was he also with the dungeon phenomenon? The people from the hunter's office noticed that the transformation into a monster had just happened. They were wondering why it was not seen in the dungeon report. Things were getting more and more interesting for Miss Chiu. The greed spirit heard his team member ask why Bob had become like this. He had never entered the dungeon. The spirit said that it was now out of his control. There was no way the spirit could have expected the god to completely dissolve. Adelo looked at what was happening and called the god of greed a fool, for the god of greed had allowed the spirit soul of Rukus and the Sea Crown Warrior to merge together. Now the Sea Crown Warrior had complete control over Bob's body. Blondie thought everything was going through the ass. The goddess said that the spirit of greed was overreacting, for he had merged the dungeon boss and the spirit part of the mortal world. Now the armored dragon fought the stronger mutated body of the Sea Crown Warrior. Striking blow after blow, the armored dragon gained the 10th point. The first team was victorious. The match ended in a tie, 1-on-1. The blonde rejoiced that it didn't make a difference that Bob had more power. After all, speed solved everything. The goddess told him not to rejoice. The girl motioned for him to think about how he would survive the next round. The commentators voiced that the next battle was about to start soon. All medics were asked to check Bob's wounds. The armored dragon turned to the blonde man and shouted to him that she had won. He was proud of her. Abruptly, the dragon's attention was caught by something. He noticed Bob standing up. He was somehow strange. The commentators tried to address Bob. They asked him to put his weapon down and get medical treatment in the infirmary quickly. The fight with the hunter was limited unless he wanted his hunter qualification removed. The blonde tried to warn the dragon that the underbelly looked strange. The dragon needed to be more careful with his opponent. Foxy said that the blonde should have been more careful too, for she understood the lizard language. Foxy said that the creep seemed pissed off about the blonde using his increased speed to disrupt the battle and now he wanted to kill him. The young lad was surprised that the monsters were so smart. Abruptly and loudly Bob roared that he would kill his opponent. The commentators asked for Bob's action to stop. They insisted that he leave the stage immediately. They asked for Bob to be stopped quickly, at least by someone. The boss shouted loudly. Turning to God, he asked what the man was doing. Bob abruptly started his attack on the armored dragon. The blonde watched carefully as the armored dragon lost its strength. Shin Yuan shouted loudly, trying to call out to the dragon. The blonde man asked him to wait for the dragon for just 1 minute. The dragon didn't listen to its master, and started fending off the blows one by one that were thrown by the big man. Shin Yuan saw that the blows were too strong. They damaged the dragon's armor. The blonde man didn't understand what was wrong with Bob. It seemed to him that he had completely lost his mind. The armored dragon, losing his armor and losing his strength, only repeated a few words. He had to protect his master. The blonde man told the armored dragon to get a grip. The young boy watched as the dragon began to fall. The fox turned loudly to the blonde man and warned us to be careful, for the monster was coming at him, trying to strike him. The god of greed said that time was running out. He reached forward. Pink smoke began to envelope Bob around him. Bob's head turned black. The big guy was standing in front of the guy, raising his weapon up and trying to strike him. The god of greed, holding his hand in the smoke, told the Sea Emperor warrior to return. Abruptly Bob threw his weapon to the ground. A red big axe pierced the arena. The god of greed appeared above Shin Yuan and rose high above Bob. Pink smoke once again enveloped everything around. The big guy had a change in his body. Bob's eyes lost their bright light. The smoke enveloped him more and more. Feeling the changes in himself, he roared loudly. Looking at those in front of him, he uttered that he wanted to sleep very badly, his face taking on a scary look. The leader of the second team used magic, intending to intervene and stop the antics of his comrade while the Monday player Bob stopped the attack. However, the armored dragon was also badly wounded. The team, good luck, broke the rules of the game. Bob fell to the floor. The smoke began to evaporate. The first team watched carefully to see what would happen next. The announcer remarked that one way or another, the two matches brought many surprises. The announcer asked if the player Bob had returned to human form. The god of greed remarked that the blonde owed him another debt, pointing to the armored dragon. The spirit said that the red lizard was already dying. Why wouldn't the young lad give it to the spirit? A skill called Advanced Regeneration was activated. The experience reached the evolution standard. The bloodline of the dragon race was activated. The route evolution was confirmed. The blonde man holding the armored dragon said that he would not give it to the spirit of greed, because it was his most trusted companion. The goddess, calling the spirit a stinking toad, asked how dare he play with human conscience. Shin Yuan noticed that the flames from the body of the armored dragon were getting stronger and stronger. Shin Yuan shouted loudly that the armored dragon was starting to burn. To the god of greed it didn't matter at all. He didn't care about it at all. He just wanted his lizard. The blonde man couldn't believe his eyes. He didn't understand what was happening to his protector. Flames engulfed everything around him. Very strange things started to happen to the armored dragon. A girl with long red hair and horns stood in front of everyone. Everyone watching could not understand what was happening. The girl's horns resembled the horns of the devil. Her eyes took on a yellow color with shades of green. The flame-armored dragon evolved into a human inferno dragon. The commentators noticed that Danley's broken arm was healed. Behind the mask was a cute girl. Looking closely at her, they noticed that her face didn't match the appearance of the contestant. Maybe they took the wrong photo during registration. The blonde was surprised that the humanoid form of the armored dragon was in front of him. The goddess said that originally it was just an imitation, but now the armored dragon was really a human. The vixen said that her hair was longer too. The girl that was previously a dragon felt her face. Something shocked her very much. The girl continued to examine her body. She tried to scrutinize what had happened to her. The blonde was surprised that the girl hid behind him. He thought she was still afraid of Bob. He said it was okay. After all, the bad guy had been defeated. Adelo said that most likely the girl was just shy. The girl in front of them replied that her face had changed from lizard to human, and she still felt a little awkward without the mask. Shin Yuan heard his name being called out. He turned around, expecting to find out what was wanted from him. The god of greed said that the blonde man had to give him this lizard as payment for saving his life. Shin Yuan tried to figure out if the spirit was a bandit. Attilo said to ignore the blonde man. The god of greed was simply afraid that if a mortal died in his arms, he would be condemned by heaven. That's why he saved the blonde man. The goddess continued. The gods in the human world could not kill mortals, so the gods should be thankful for the weakening of the Sea Emperor's warrior and the fact that they were able to finish him off. The god of greed suddenly opened his mouth. Jumping slightly, the god turned to the blonde man and told him to forget about it. He warned that the guy with glasses would take care of the blonde man in the next match, asking if the guy had any cards left. The god of greed saw perfectly well the value of the blonde guy's abilities since he refused to give him what he wanted. Suddenly the voice of the commentators interrupted the spirit's pondering. They said that after discussing with the referee, they concluded that player Bob had seriously violated the rules since it was a team match. The team, good luck, would be removed from the match as punishment. Shin Yuan's team would enter the next match. The spirit of greed did not believe these words. Everyone congratulated the blonde man's team for winning the match. He, the pack next to the fox and the girl that was only recently a lizard, did not expect this turn of events. Shin Yuan did not believe at all that they had won. Despite some incidents were quite good news, both sides were without casualties. Since player Bob had broken the rules, the blonde team was coming out ahead. The team, luck, had lost, but the presenters thanked them for 2 great matches. The god of greed didn't understand what had happened. He didn't understand how they could lose and what it meant. The blonde man rejoiced that they had won. They could defeat the god. But abruptly he heard himself being called out and told not to get cocky. The guy with glasses turned to the blonde man. He reminded him that they weren't done yet. The boss said he knew the guy's cards had a limit. It meant he would kill the blonde if he continued to play. The blonde man wasn't scared of that at all. He left some cards specifically for the guy with glasses. He wanted to see how the guy would fail to take care of himself. The announcers voiced that they had the next 2 groups of players next. They thanked the players for a great fight. Bob woke up trying to cover his body with his hands. He didn't realize where his clothes were. The blonde man didn't realize how the man knew he didn't have any cards. Otherwise there would have been a disaster. The man with glasses wondered if the guy still had all the cards. He was glad he didn't have to go. Otherwise it would have been a disaster. The 2 of them smiled as they realized they had been given the opportunity to get back to life. The commentators invited the winning team to return to the gym and prepare for the next match. They sent the injured to the infirmary for treatment. The employees of the hunter's office watched the 2 teams fight. The big man asked if it was true that the dark-skinned kid had demonized for an hour. He wondered if it was the owner of the artifact. The lady that stood next to him laughed. Xiaoyu asked why Xiao was laughing. She was laughing with the idiot she saw in front of her. Xiao continued to laugh. It was amazing for her to shamelessly use her power like a child walking down the street with gold. She wondered again if that group of people were stupid. The big guy noticed the girl's magic staff poking at him. He said they had now confirmed the unknown owner of the artifact. He asked if she wanted to make a move. She said there was no need to do so. They continued to follow the blonde man. The girl asked not to mention the blonde's little brother. That contract god was definitely a bad one. Continuing to stare at the spirit of greed, the girl added that if they didn't explain anything, Tsubaki could also take action. From the direction of the exit came words about hating everyone. The losing team headed towards the exit. They called the blonde man shameless, a bastard, and wished him dead. The spirit was furious. He didn't realize how far the blonde was going to go in making a god look like a laughingstock. The guy with the glasses asked the spirit if the match was over. It was time for them to disperse as well. This infuriated the god even more. He started to claim that they wanted to run away after losing, calling them weaklings. The god had given them a chance, but they were useless. They were sure they weren't to blame for losing. Taking the guy by the tie, the god of greed moved him sharply towards him. The man in glasses did not expect such actions towards himself at all. The spirit said that their contract was to make the blonde pay, and as long as his wish was not fulfilled, the contract would always be in force. The guy had to help the spirit get the deck of fate, and then he would gain incomparable power. Suddenly, Mr. Chun appeared in front of the losing team. He realized that the purple smoke was coming from the contract guy. He turned to those who were standing there. The information said that the new hire could be a person named Shin Yuan. Looking at them, he wondered who they were. The god of greed shouted for the guy to never mention the name in front of him. He asked him to quickly get the guy out of there or he could kill him. It didn't matter to the guy as long as it wasn't blonde. However, turning to the girl, the guy said if she signed a contract with the god it would be bad. He advised her to give the artifact to break the contract as soon as possible. The spirit asked the guy if he could see the god. He realized that the contract god was in front of him. Abruptly, the spirit's attention was caught by something. He looked forward in surprise. The god did not understand at all how this was possible. He let the man go. He realized that they urgently needed to get out of there. Turning his back to his team, the spirit began to run. Everyone looked at him carefully. They didn't understand why they needed to run. The spirit didn't face the goddess that appeared in front of him. As long as he didn't make any mistakes, everything was fine. Behind the guy, the spirit saw the goddess. He couldn't understand why she had to make a pact with a human. The guy said that taking possession of a mortal's body was a sin. The goddess added that the merging of the souls of the two worlds was the culprit. Violet rays of light illuminated all around. With sharp ends they began to stretch on and on. Abruptly the violet rays reached straight for the spirit of greed. He tried to flee quickly. He realized that his sentence was a descending divine punishment. He confirmed that he knew he was wrong. He carefully watched as the rays came closer and closer to him. Once in the center of the violet light, the spirit promised that he would retrieve the body. He shouted out so that no one would dare approach him. Suddenly the purple light changed to pink smoke. Through that smoke the screams were still coming through. Blondin's team was accepting all the congratulations for their victory. They had also made it to the top 4. Next was to be the 4th group match. They should have expected it. Blondin's old buddy, watching the fight, asked where he could find such strong teammates. The girl was happy for her buddy. The guy was not happy about it. He looked at what was happening with anger. The guy didn't see the fight, but he heard a voice speaking to him about the need for the blonde to win the next battle. Wang Jun didn't understand why it was necessary to do so. The man that was behind the guy said that he made the decision after watching the fight in those two ladies. This man was Charlie Marina, a professional magician, the leader of Greenwood. He heard him being approached, rebuking him for still drinking, and the next game was about to start. He replied that with his strength, it didn't matter whether he was drunk or not, but a duel with that blonde guy could only allow them to wait for the next time. Wang Jun didn't agree with his captain. He was confident that he could win. After all, it was only Shin Yuan. The captain said that he wanted to ask the two girls that the blonde guy brought. The guy didn't understand what Charlie told him at all. The girl, hearing the captain's words, was also at a loss. Charlie, remembering the two girls, said that he fell in love at first sight with the furry beauty, cute and beautiful vixen. Also, the long-legged beauty who can fight well. The stern face under the mask made him stop, but he can't. The captain decided to take advantage of winning the next game to ask the blondes for the contact information of these two in exchange. Shin Yuan was so eager to become a hunter, and refusing an old friend's request would be difficult for him. The captain's spring was about to come. Wang Jun turned to the girl and said that the captain was already 35. He wondered why he still did not have a companion. He thought it was because of his looks. After thinking a little, the girl replied that it was most likely a matter of brains. The captain asked the young man to surrender for the sake of his happiness. He tried to imagine how the blonde would obediently give him the girl's contacts. In that case, he would also become a member of the group. The guy really wanted to slap Charlie. The girl turned to the captain and said she understood something, but she didn't know if it was appropriate to say it or not. She asked if he didn't think it was easier to show them his power directly, if it was easier to gain a woman's favor than to lose on purpose. What kind of a ball could a man have who loses on purpose? The guy didn't understand why he had to talk about it at all. Charlie froze abruptly, pondering the questions he had just heard. The captain remembered the last time he had a duel. The first one to fall into the arms of a certain beauty wasn't him. He wondered if it could have been because of his cruelty. The guy replied that it was because he failed to hit on her and had a fight with her bodyguard. The girl said they were originally in love, but the girl reminded him that it could have been different this time because his rival was Yuan Day. The captain didn't quite understand what that could mean. Charlie heard him being asked why a beautiful girl with such strength would want to team up with Shin Yuan. Knowing the blonde's strength, it was not clear how such a scoundrel could be accepted by both sides. The captain thought it was because he was very handsome. The girl said that he was certainly not ugly, but not handsome either. The guy wondered how the girl knew the details. She laughed. How would she know that? She fell silent. She suggested that they had been tricked by the blonde man. They think he is very strong, but it wasn't really true. The captain and the guy didn't quite understand what the conversation was about. The guy remarked that this is exactly what he meant, even if the captain is stupid. Such a ridiculous excuse. Abruptly shouting interrupted his speech. The captain realized that he had been so easily fooled. The blonde really had let him snap at losing. Charlie boiled with anger. He didn't understand how the blonde dared to cheat his goddess. He would never forgive him. The guy said that Shin Yuan was their childhood friend. Even though the captain hated him, the girl suggested that they fight together. The captain promised the guy that he would personally deal with the blonde man. If the guy met those two girls, he should have been nicer to them, for maybe one of them would be his sister-in-law. The guy added that he was the one who bet on the blonde man, asking him not to interfere in the duel between the men. Fox turned to Shin Yuan. He was so popular, everyone was talking about him. She asked him if he wanted to say hello to these men. He told them to move on. Something abruptly stopped the blonde man. He cursed loudly. Walking towards the exit, Xiaoyu tried to call out to Tsubaki. He tried to see if he was slacking off as he continued walking forward and looking around. Suddenly something caught the man's attention. He was trying to take a look at what it could be. Abruptly the big man saw two men start running at him. They were shouting that there was an assassin. They were asking to get out of the way and not block the path. Xiaoyu looked at the two men that ran lightning near him. He decided it was best not to worry about them. Xiaoyu turned to the guy. Something caught his attention. He scrutinized what was in front of his eyes. He saw a figure in the guy's hands. He interrogated if it was an artifact. The guy holding the figure explained that apparently it was that little girl's artifact, but it bothered the guy a lot. He didn't know why. From the beginning, the figure was emitting purple smoke. Xiaoyu walked closer to the body and asked how the contract man was there. The guy replied, although the girl was alive, but he didn't know why he couldn't feel her soul. The big guy watching this asked if the thing that was in the guy's hands would explode. He said he didn't think so. He was surprised that he couldn't break the contract. The big guy suggested that the guy call his goddess and ask her what was wrong. The guy said it was better not to call her but to break the thing that was in his hands and see what was inside. Abruptly the figure in the guy's hands screamed. Pink smoke began to waft from its mouth in large tubers, continuing to envelope everything around it. The figure started screaming even louder to be let go. The guys continued to stare at it. The figure yelled that the guys could still use it. They continued to hold it in their hands. The two guys got really scared. They didn't expect the figure to be able to talk. Abruptly scared, the guy threw the figure out of his hands, calling it gross. The big guy asked not to lose the figure, saying that it might explode. The figure flew downward, continuing to envelope the air with its pink smoke. Abruptly, the figure fell onto the body of a girl who was lying on the ground. The god of greed realized that control of that body was once again in his hands. He laughed, once on top of the girl's head. The spirit laughed as even the goddess could not capture it completely. Now getting his body back, the god of greed had nothing to fear at all. The girl's hands were in front of him. They were starting to glow a bright pink color. The figure told the two men in front of him to feel the wrath of the gods. Hearing this, they smiled. This was interesting. Behind the guy a goddess appeared. She was a bit upset and over time. She asked the god of greed why didn't he experience her anger first. The figure fell abruptly silent, pondering what she had heard. The god of greed realized that he had made a mistake. He apologized. The spirit was too excited about the return of the body and he accidentally got those words off his tongue. He asked him to forgive him. The guy wondered, so who the spirit was? The spirit was surprised. He didn't expect the goddess who had signed a contract with the guy to say anything to him. He replied that she only said it was impossible to communicate with her, although she lent him her power rather quickly, but never explained anything. Abruptly pink smoke fell from the girl's mouth. The smoke did not interrupt at all and went into the figure's mouth. The guys said that they knew someone was in possession of that girl's body. They asked to leave her and then they would let him go. The spirit asked to wait. If he got free, the girl could die. The boy wondered if those words were a threat. The figure replied that the owner of this body was a girl named Tang Tang. She was also a member of the dungeon hunter and seemed to be used as bait. But her team was attacked by the dungeon boss after entering the labyrinth where the spirit was, and they were all barely left alive. Tang Tang found the spirit statue at the last moment and prayed to it, collapsing at its feet and stretching out her hands to it. Her soul was very weak and was on the verge of death, so to prolong her life but made a contract with him. For the sake of preserving her life, she gave him the right to temporarily use her body, to return her body when she was out of danger. Even the young guy's goddess couldn't interfere with someone else's legal contracts. In short, the girl could definitely die if the guy tried to forcibly separate them. The spirit replied that he was a skeptical person, but if the girl could die because of this, he would feel uncomfortable. The two guys couldn't figure out what to do next. They needed to protect the girl, take her back, watch her. They saw the girl who was possessed by the spirit start to run. The guy told the spirit to take his time, for he had to go first. But the spirit, hearing this, began to run even faster. Abruptly the figure was grabbed by a hand. The spirit just started to say his words about never getting in the guy's sight again. Mrs. Shou appeared in front of them. She held the figure's head tightly, asked the spirit not to leave in a hurry. After all, this was their first meeting. She was at Tsubaki of the association. The execution of the sword. Since the spirit could speak normally, the mistress had many more questions for him. She brought the figure closer to her face. The spirit began to emit pink smoke again. The commentators welcomed the honored guests and the leaders. It was the final four, the semifinals. The presenters asked that the guests look at the screen. The rules of the semifinal would be slightly different from the previous game. Players would enter through a portal into an isolated dungeon of the outside world. Participants would appear at the edge of the map. Everyone was encouraged to prepare for the confrontation. In the semi-finals, 3 players from the same group will simultaneously enter the dungeon. The mother is a team battle, which evaluates the cohesiveness of the group. Next, the participants should have paid attention to the crystals that they held in their hands. If the crystal was destroyed, the team lost and automatically transferred back to the arena. Their goal was to capture the crystal of the other team and destroy it. Of course, if the opponent was too strong and the participants wanted to admit defeat, they could safely break the crystal. Participants should not be upset if their teammates were defeated. The conditions for winning the match was that as long as 2 teams remained in the game, they would automatically come out on top regardless of the number. In this match, 4 teams participated simultaneously. The presenters suggested a battle in which no one would die. Next came the introduction of the players' exits. The first to speak was the Greenwood team. The captain of this team was Charlie. Then the St. Evangelicals team, their captain being Elizabeth, a fine pharmacist. Then the Bronze team, captained by the Red Ghost, Fumu Nobunaga. And finally, the dark horse of this season, was the team named after his own name, their captain being Shin Yuan himself. Flying cameras were set up around the court, so that the spectators could watch this wonderful game on air, without any interference. Taking the card in his hands, the blonde man said that the rules of the match suited him, bringing the golden card up to his face. He could finally show himself. He was glad for it. The monster, something like a rock, had yellow eyes, several horns, large paws, and huge claws. It gradually approached its victims, swiping its paws over. It would deliver an incredible blow just by placing a paw on the ground. The blonde man, who was standing behind a rock, covered by tree leaves, saw the huge monster approaching them. He reprimanded. The blonde man's team didn't understand. This was a dungeon, so why could they see the sky? What kind of giant monster was this? His teammate replied that they wouldn't be able to defeat such a huge monster. Shin Yuan heard the words that the so-called dungeon was a crack in the world. Attilo continued. It was the boundary between the earth and the other world. The blonde man tried to listen to her carefully. The so-called dungeon was a distortion of space that made an entrance into the earth. But Numenon did not leave the original place. Shin Yuan inquired if this place was the other world. The blonde guy asked what would happen if they went out. The goddess told him not to be afraid. Ordinary people could not cross this boundary. Besides, the guy didn't realize what kind of super large dinosaur it was. He hoped that the battle wouldn't take more than a few lives. But he shouldn't worry. The last boss of this dungeon wasn't too aggressive. What the guy in front of him now saw was the boss of that dungeon, an earth dragon. This was a creature that rarely attacked humans. Shin Yuan doubted that this was true. However, the blonde man should not have worried if the dragon annoyed the guy. This game was made for the young man. The host continued. The crystal in the guy's hands could activate a shield. When each player's life was threatened, then the crystal would quickly transport back to the arena. The players should spare no effort. Glancing at the crystal, the blonde guy noticed that the item was strong. He was afraid lest the item would reduce the number of deaths in the dungeon raids if it suddenly became more popular. The goddess replied that this prop was tied to this dungeon, and there seemed to be a special mechanism. Remembering his partner, the guy worried that the vixen hadn't returned yet. The fox, walking forward, felt the rays of green light piercing through her body. She didn't understand how it was possible. The rays of light continued to pierce through her illusions. In different places on the vixen's body, hiding behind a tree, the vixen saw the archer who was striking the players. The girl wanted to find the enemy, but she didn't expect the enemy to find her first. She realized that they were mana arrows. Judging from the arrows that had just been fired, the archer's strength was not small. This made it very difficult. The vixen saw a pumped-up guy standing in the tree. His bow in his hands meant the danger the archer could cause to the players. Luckily, the fox's abilities weren't weak either. She wasn't at all afraid of being shot by this guy. Looking at the archer once more, she realized that the opponent was very confident in his abilities. But as an archer, it was too obvious to stay in one place. So why didn't she see his teammates? In that moment, the vixen realized it was all a trap. The archer is a decoy. The advance patrol should make a surprise attack after the archer locates the target. But the problem was that the vixen couldn't sense anyone around him. High up in a tree, above the vixen, sat a guy. In a whisper he turned to his teammate. He said that he had found the enemy. It was Shin Yuan's team, the Red Fox. The participant heard him being warned. The other team could use illusions. He shouldn't let them find himself. The guy activated the silent movement skill. He told his comrades not to worry. After using the skill, no enemy would be able to hear his voice. He was about to kill the enemy while that one used his doppelganger. Looking at his opponent, the guy turned to the fox. He said that she would regret being alone. Abruptly, the Red Fox enemy ran to meet her. He tried to strike at her, jumping high to get the first blood in this match. He really wanted to get her. Something abruptly caught the fox's attention. The Red Fox saw a pink color light up from her back. She didn't understand where it could have come from. Abruptly stepping forward, the enemy tried to continue striking his opponent. Suddenly, the opponent of Shin Yuan's team felt that something was going wrong. He realized that it was all an illusion, but he had a feeling. He didn't understand how it was possible that he had been noticed. A fox's voice was heard behind him. The vixen touched his enemy, greeting him. The enemy was surrounded on all sides. It was a counterattack. The boy received blow after blow. Hearing him being dispatched from there, furry fists gripped the lad. He didn't understand why those fists were so powerful. He didn't know what to expect from the vixen. The fox turned to the guy. She showed her teeth a little. She told him to stay away from her, calling him a little assassin. Foxy noticed that her opponent was making the sounds around him go completely silent. She asked if he was a stalker. The guy said it didn't matter. He wondered how the fox was able to find him. He also heard his teammates trying to find him. They didn't see him at all. The fox realized that she heard something, but it wasn't the guy's voice at all. Taking her ear with her hand, the vixen said that it was actually thanks to him. Her hearing was 100 times better than the stalker. The conversation between him and his comrade she heard perfectly. The boy heard his comrade asking how he was doing. He said that they had been discovered. The fox heard everything. His comrades told him to lure her out, and they would shoot. After thinking a little, the fox lowered her head. Listening to the words, she lifted her paw up. Turning to the guy in front of her, she said he had a strange odor. He was very surprised because he washed before the match. He thought that maybe he stepped on something in the woods. His teammate asked the guy what happened. The fox said that he heard the smell of the medicine. Apparently it was the enhancement drug that the captain gave the guy to drink. Since the opponent of the pursuer was a fox, she had a strong sense of smell. The guy heard it all in the headphones that was in his ear. The fox was very surprised that they drank the enhancement drug. The stalker told his companion not to talk to him, because the fox had heard all the information again. After a little thought, the guy thought, since the sneak attack had failed, he asked permission to fight the fox head-on. Preparing to attack, the guy stood in front of the fox. He possessed the Vajra martial art. The fox realized that the guy in front of her was not an assassin, a martial artist who changed his fighting style by changing his mana. Smiling slightly, the fox said that was on the condition that he could hit her. The boy began to attack, quickly approaching his target. The blows were accompanied by tongues of flame. The guy tried to strike his opponent from the back. Fox heard the guy exclaim. He didn't expect to see more doppelgangers in front of him at all. The stalker found himself in front of the doppelgangers again. He didn't realize at all where the real fox was and where the illusions were. He felt the fox's paw grab his head. The fox shrieked that she had caught it. Starting to laugh loudly, she began to pull her paw to deliver another blow. Abruptly, the fox felt her paw being grabbed sharply and firmly. The stalker had been waiting for this attack. He grabbed the vixen firmly behind him by the arm and was about to throw her over himself. The vixen didn't realize what the guy was going to do. She didn't expect such resistance from her pursuer. Abruptly, the guy threw her with all his might. She started flying forward. The archer, seeing what was happening, realized that now he could definitely hit his target. That is, the red fox. The guy took aim, stretching his arms forward. The enemy's green rays illuminated everything around him. The rays came closer and closer to the fox's body. She was surrounded by her opponents. Watching what was happening, the vixen cursed. She realized that she was in sniper range. The green rays began to pass through her body. The fox tried to run away, trying to dodge the enemy's rays. She tried to look at her clothes. Her dress was shot through. She was very upset. She liked her clothes. The fox, as she continued to examine the aftermath after the attack, she was shocked. But the fox noticed something else. Her proud tail had also been shot. The guy said he already knew how to deal with her doppelganger. She angrily showed him her tail. Abruptly, she realized the words that had just been spoken. She decided to ask again if she had heard and understood everything correctly. The stalker realized, when the fox tried to attack, she would transfer her body into a safe doppelganger, but when she attacked, she couldn't activate her skills for a short period of time. In other words, the only thing left to do was to wait until the fox attacked the stalker and he was able to knock it down. That would be his victory. He called the fox to him, asking him to hit it. She asked what would happen if she didn't attack him. He realized that could happen too. She asked if he was sure he could catch her forever. Foxes never attacked. The girl added that the hatred of her tail would not be forgotten so easily. The archer turned to the guy asking if he was sure he could catch the fox again. The guy wanted to try to do it. The guy's name was Z. He heard his earpiece asking him how his preparations were going. He apologized to his captain, for he was still in the middle of the battle. The captain of this team was already prepared. All that remained was to wait for the fox to fall into the trap. The two contents of the substance, red and green, that were in the flask mixed into one. The process of collation began. The additional conditions of magic, enhancements, and skill were invalid. The team captain of the Holy Evangelist team, named Elizabeth, was an apothecary hunter. She activated the boundaries and arranged all the positions. The next step was to quietly wait. She waited for the moment to slowly gather the enemies that would go into the zone she made. The vixen smelled a pungent odor. The thought immediately came to her mind that it was a magic potion. She thought her opponent had used poison, but after looking around a bit, she realized it was like some kind of boundary line. The guy said that just now their boundary line had ended. The vixen could no longer use magic or any special abilities. The guy exclaimed enthusiastically that the vixen could no longer use her cloning skill. The vixen didn't understand how such a facet could be created in an instant. She wondered if it was meant for her specifically. The guy said it wasn't for her, but she had a special ability, May's consequence, which was a big destabilizing factor in the match. She just happened to fall into that trap. She was surprised that it was because of the May's consequence. She called it waiting for the rabbit. The guy pointed out that the victory conditions were only two teams making the finals. In this position they had an absolute advantage. The stalker said that the only thing left to do was to hold the place. Just wait for the game to end. The vixen wondered, with such a trap strategy, could the guy really call his team the Evangelist of the Saints? The guy couldn't help himself. And who said their captain was just a pharmacist? They could only rely on strategy to win the match. The stalker heard the voices of his teammates, asking not to tell others about their strategies. The fox realized that she couldn't use shadow power yet. The guy noticed the fox do something quickly. He was shocked by this behavior. She pulled off her cape. He asked why she undressed. She said it was just a cape taken off by his teammates. The stalker covered his face with his hands and wondered why the vixen had undone the buttons on her chest. The earpiece in the guy's ear asked again what had happened. Archer realized that the stalker had lived in the mountains and boxed for a long time. His resistance to women was very low, but that wasn't important at all. He didn't understand why he would undo the buttons on her chest. The vixen said she didn't take off her cape just to show him. After all, her breasts were getting bigger and she would be in trouble if the button came off. The archer and stalker heard the words that the chest could have been even bigger. Blushing, they thought, where bigger? The captain in his earpiece asked the pursuer to finish off the fox as soon as possible because maybe the enemy was just stalling for time. The lad accepted the captain's decree, asking him to grant it to him. The vixen turned to those before her. She asked permission to say something to them. She was not some labyrinth of consequences. In the dungeon, a green mist enveloped everything around. Every tree, branch, and leaf. Shin Yuan continued walking with his teammates forward through the dungeon. He didn't understand what was happening there. Atalo explained that it was a magic potion formed by a magical boundary. The blonde tried to figure out if the wood went in the direction where the mist was. The goddess continued that this border was reserved for mages with special abilities. Fox clones couldn't be used here. The blonde realized it was most likely an enemy trap. It meant their team member was in danger. He wanted to get to her quickly. Atalo asked him to calm down. She was going to watch. The magical interference and enhancement abilities were invalid. The guy could use dragon armor but would not get to use buffs such as acceleration and deceleration. The blonde sometimes wondered why his ability was so hard to use. Apparently it was because of the goddess of fate, to which the goddess replied that it was mostly because of a poor starting foundation. Atalo continued, revealing their location. The other teams could soon gather at the spot where they were. Shin Yuan was pondering over everything he had just heard. A huge rock appeared behind his head. The blond man abruptly heard the sound. Turning his head, the guy was slumped to the ground. The rock swept past the blonde with incredible speed. The armored dragon stood and watched as the guy rolled backwards. She tried to call out to her master. Suddenly, the huge man said that he had successfully hit the captain of Shin Yuan's team. He was left alone in the armor, but he had not seen the fox yet. It was a member of the bronze new Tai team, the hunter-warrior class. In front of Shin Yuan's team members, the rest of the guys showed up. Among them was a hunter monk and a hunter swordsman. They greeted those in front of them, deciding to do everything together. Abruptly, the big man saw something that caught his attention. An armored dragon appeared above him, engulfed in bright orange flames. The dragon struck blow after blow, scorching the man with fire more and more. He had already fallen to the ground. The team members heard that the damage exceeded the allowable range of the crystal, so the player named Gu Tai had lost, and he would be moved back to the arena. The bronze team member didn't realize what the hell had happened. Just one hit and his comrade would die for a few seconds. The armored dragon, whose flames encompassed everything around him, said that it would be unforgivable if anyone dared to offend the master. The dragon was getting angrier and angrier by the second. The flames around him were getting brighter and hotter. He kept repeating 3 words. He dared to offend his master. The eyes of the dragon began to throw rays. He said that he would never forgive, but would wipe out everyone. The guys from the bronze team noticed that the guy in front of them was strong, as he defeated their partner with 1 punch. They didn't understand where the dragon was from, why they hadn't seen it before. One of the guys talked about how they couldn't lose any more people. He asked for it to be granted to him, sending his partner first. The dragon killed another bronze team member with 1 hit. The guy who was watching this didn't understand how this was possible at all. The damage of the second player exceeded the allowable range of the crystal. The player was defeated and returned back to the arena. The fellow survivor couldn't believe that even Tai Mu Jia had been killed in an instant. The armored dragon saw that there was only one enemy left in front of him. It attacked the last guy, dealing blow after blow to him. Sounds were heard from beneath the huge rock under which the young blonde boy lay. Adelo watched as the blonde was under the rock and the dragon continued to strike his opponent. The goddess, noticing the sounds, said that it scared her a lot, being above the guy. The girl said that after being hit even by such a large stone, the guy was still not defeated. The blonde guy kept making noises. The girl saw that the blonde guy had a card in his hand. In that second she realized that the stone armor had saved his life at the last moment. The goddess took a moment to realize that luckily it was just a competition. If the guy was in the dungeon he would have died by now. The blonde man reached his hand up, still making sounds that begged for help. Bringing his hand up, a beam of light formed in front of the goddess' finger. It could allow the guy to get out. The moment the blonde man crawled out from under the stone he started coughing heavily, saying that he thought he was going to die. The goddess said he had better hide under the stone while the match was still on. He asked if all the adventurers and hunters in their time were so brainless. How could they throw stones for disagreement? The girl replied that he should be careful, or else the next time the guy entered the dungeon, he could lose his life. Shin Yuan carefully looked ahead. He watched the armored dragon strike his opponent. The guy asked if the guy was a wind demon. He was a famous adventurer to hunters. Could the armored dragon even fight him in a duel? The blonde boy appreciated such a strong opponent. Most likely, he thought, their enemy's comrades must have been sitting in ambush nearby. He already wanted to help the armored dragon. The goddess told the guy not to worry about it at all. The goddess explained, while the guy was under the stone, the armored dragon had already dealt with those two. She didn't understand. Could the armored dragon really be that strong? All of the dragon's strikes were still accompanied by bright hot flames. Some sounds caught the dragon's attention. It abruptly stopped and turned around. Shin Yuan watched as the dragon was about to deliver another blow to his enemy. The blonde tried to support the armored dragon, asking for it to finish that guy off. The armored dragon realized that his master was alright, but suddenly the armored dragon's opponent started running towards his enemy. The demon-like guy tried to strike, telling his enemy not to look around while standing with his back to him. The dragon saw the red beams coming closer and closer to him from his back. The wind demon struck an armor-piercing blow. Red rays illuminated everything around, the rays mixing together with the flames. All the armor that was on the body of the armored dragon abruptly flew off the girl. She could feel her flames starting to go out. The blonde tried to find out why the armored dragon was suddenly distracted. The goddess suggested that maybe it was because he was talking a lot and that could have distracted her. The guy didn't understand, looking at the girl who appeared before their eyes. Why only the mask and breastplate had shattered? The opponent explained that armor-piercing strike. It was a sword technique against enemy armor. Unfortunately, the guy only weakened her strength that time, and next time he would send her home. The guy added that he really liked that girl over there. He asked her if she would like to join their group. If so, he could give her the win. The blonde replied that the guy would be better off eating shit. He was unfortunately alone, so the blonde would send him home later. Noticing how the armored dragon was hiding behind the blonde's back, he wondered if she was really that shy if she wasn't wearing a mask. The girl asked the guy if he would give up the win so easily since they were in the middle of a match. He said he didn't care since he didn't aim to win the competition. After some thought, the guy added that the purpose of this contest was to let the newcomers show their strength, to get more commissions by performing well in the contest. He continued, winning or losing the competition was just an extra prize for them. Finding a great talent was their main goal. The blonde guy asked why the armored dragon had caught the guy's attention. After a bit of silence, the guy from the opposing team answered the blonde's question. It was all because of the girl's horns. He said that the girl was a demon, a human with dungeon syndrome, just like him. The blonde man didn't understand which demon he was talking about. Shin Yuan didn't understand what demon dungeon syndrome their opponent was talking about since his armored dragon was a dragon. The guy was surprised at what he heard. He asked again if he heard about the dragon for sure. The guy smiled. He started laughing. The demon laughed louder and louder. Shin Yuan tried to find out if the demon was really an idiot. The demon kept laughing. This was the first time he had heard of such a thing as underground dragon syndrome. To the guy it seemed like the blonde was making an appeal to lie. The opponent kept asking if the team really wanted to kill the dragon. The guy added that the so-called dungeon syndrome was caused by souls merging with monsters after the hunters killed them. The way the guy looked now, it was after defeating the demon when he absorbed its power. The blonde didn't understand what that had to do with him. The guy from the opposing team answered. To be frank, he had killed the demon with his skill alone. After a moment's hesitation, the guy raised his hand, pointed his finger at the girl, and asked what about her. The guy didn't even want to hear the words that this team could kill a dragon. Shin Yuan and the girl were angry when they heard the words of the guy from the opposing team. They didn't understand how he could know that they couldn't win. The guy explained that this was the crux of the problem. Currently, among the world records, there were only 4 true dragons that had been officially and successfully killed by hunters. The blonde didn't understand how this was possible. Why there were all here 4 of them when only relics were discovered every year. The goddess explained that there was a difference between a real dragon and a creature called a dragon. The armored dragon itself is a lizard, not dungeon syndrome, just happened to evolve and got a rare skill, the dragon bloodline, and the so-called dungeon syndrome. It is an evolutionary state in which you need to be stronger than the boss. A real dragon soul. It meant that the skills of the armored dragon were super rare. The guy said that it didn't matter if it was a dragon or a demon. He only gave them 2 options. The first option was to join their team, or to join their team after he defeated them. The demon decided it was time to show the guy some real power. The strength of the dungeon syndrome called Blue Demon. It was an azure ghost demon. Shin Yuan and the girl watched the demon carefully. The demon added that now the amount of its abilities were more than 5 times higher than before. He said that now he would see how long the blonde dragon could last. Shin Yuan tried to show the demon that something was in the sky. The dragon added just 3 words, big beast, soaring. The demon appreciated the team's attempts. It was witty, but they wouldn't succeed. Abruptly he felt something happen. He turned around. Suddenly the dungeon boss was above the demon and was walking forward, getting faster and faster, getting closer and closer to the teams. The blonde was amused by the way the dungeon boss fell from the sky, and the demon's damage exceeded the damage allowed for the crystal, so this player would be transported back to the arena, for he was defeated. The commentators welcomed the players back to their competitive arena. Even though they lost, they were thanked for their excellent play. The demon was upset, for his led team was the first to be eliminated. It was very shameful. He continued to look at the pictures of the players in the game. The team members turned to the demon. Now it would be harder for their team to recruit players. They didn't realize what the big durian was. It looked like they hadn't gotten that chance yet. The demon was interested in what the 2 people were doing in front of him. The archer and the stalker were also in the arena. They had underestimated the opponent. Their opponent was too strong. They wouldn't be able to win. The stalker said that such physical abilities their opponent possessed were a trick. He wondered what kind of vixen it was. The demon approached the guy and told him not to be discouraged, because he had worked hard. Losing was clearly not in his power. The demon asked the stalker to look at himself and realized that he was indeed talented. The demon immediately offered to stand up the stalker as a member of their bronze team. The stalker replied that he didn't want the first team to drop out. The captain of another team, named Charlie, took another drink of an alcoholic beverage while holding the bottle. He said to take down the lord of the land as much as they want. The huge dungeon monster marched forward, accelerating faster and faster every second. He scared away all the birds, and crushed all the trees below him. Fox couldn't believe the teams had gone so far as to trespass. She, remembering everything that happened earlier, came to the conclusion that all the teams were very aggressive. But in any case, it was better for her to find Shin Yuan's brother Shin Yuan and the armored dragon. She didn't want to be ambushed again at all. Abruptly behind Orchins showed the girl. The girl heard all the things the fox said. If the red fox didn't want to be ambushed, perhaps the girl could entertain her. The vixen replied, if she were the girl she would hide and watch the other teams kill each other. Xiao Han laughed, turning to look at the girl. The girl said it was just a competition. She wanted to see the fox's strength faster than going through to the next round. She was extremely curious as to how she was able to defeat her teammates. Fox, scrutinizing the opponent that stood before her, asked if Lisa knew the girl too much as a cheer class pharmacist. The girl replied, whatever the vixen thought of her like that, she was also a S-rank hunter. The girl held up 2 vials. One had a green liquid in it, the other had a red liquid in it. The vixen suspected that the pharmacist was up to something with the potion. Xiao Hong decided to attack first. In this case, the fox was happy to help. The fox pulled its paw, preparing to strike its opponent. The support pharmacist held 2 vials in her hands. The fire rays that came from the fox shattered the vial with the potion contents inside. The vixen rejoiced that her strike had taken a toll on her opponent. A strange odor wafted to the vixen's nose. The vixen could smell how strong the odor was. Red rays enveloping everything around her. The pharmacist didn't even doubt that the red fox would take the bait. This potion was just right for her. Naturally, the fox would be stronger if she drank it after meeting her opponent. The pharmacist was about to strike her enemy. The fox was ready to respond to the blow her opponent was throwing. The pharmacist tried to strike the vixen, but instead of the vixen she felt something else. The girl found herself surrounded by illusions. Each blow went through an illusion. This caused her to have some questions. She realized that these were the shadows her team member was talking about. She realized that the physical blows were no use at all. The girl felt the fox's paws encircle her waist from behind. This raised questions from the girl. She didn't understand what Xiao Hong was trying to do. The fox was turning the girl over, trying to give her another blow. Smiling slightly, the fox answered the girl's question that she was making love. The blow was so strong that a blue light illuminated everything around it. The fox remarked that she was still too strong for the support pharmacist to fight her head-on. The fox asked what this potion was. It didn't work on her. Was it a chronic poison? The pharmacist replied that she wasn't going to use something as sneaky as poison. After a bit of silence, she added that this potion she had made specifically for the vixen. The vixen suggested the pharmacist forget about it. First, the girl needed to get out of the fight. Xiao Hong, suggesting this idea to the girl, laughed loudly. The girl interjected, surely the vixen wanted there to get out of the fight. After hesitating a bit, she added that the fox would have to entertain the guests before doing so. Figures of different animals appeared behind the fox. Suddenly several monsters were walking towards the fox, their eyes glowing with a red light. The fox didn't understand what was happening to the monsters. She watched them carefully as they came closer and closer to her. The pharmacist said that it seemed that what she had undertaken was beginning to work. She gave the fox a stimulant that attracted the monsters. Once right in front of the monsters, the fox realized that now they all in this forest who were afraid of the dungeon boss would be attracted to her. The vixen, after thinking a bit about what she heard, said that it would be very troublesome. A drop of sweat dripped down her cheek. She pondered her next actions. Abruptly, the hand that was holding the weapon appeared in front of Team Shin Yuan's eyes. Wang Jun turned to the blonde man. It was obvious that he was looking for him. The guy was a bit relieved that he had finally found his old buddy. Shin Yuan wondered why the guy was alone. The girl was standing next to him, trying to study her opponent. Shin Yuan noticed that Wang Jun looked out of breath. He tried to find out if everything was alright. The guy replied that he only had a small conflict with his teammates. Pointing his finger at the blonde guy, the guy's buddy said to quickly hide. Shin Yuan didn't understand why he had to do that. From the depths of the dungeon, loud words could be heard that Group Captain Wang Jun was looking for the blonde man everywhere.